but they weren't included in the agenda. Kind of hard to approve contracts you haven't seen.
That's right. I think we just.
Yeah, that's why, yeah.
I'm all for. I don't.
Is Rick in there?
Feel right about something. I want to move next month. You don't have to do anything.
Do what?
I don't want to. I haven't read this at all. We just got it.
So are we approving the contract or an amendment?
The
It might be
contract.
the amendment.
No, it's the contracts.
I don't want to. I don't want to approve it.
All right, I'm waiting for two council people.
This is on a consent calendar too.
He puts the numbers on them for me. So, once I get the agenda, the numbers, that would be great.
I don't have a problem approving it. It's just that I thought we ought to at least have a copy of the contracts.
All right,
Well,
ready?
I have an issue with how we do stuff on Friday for Tuesday.
Oh,
Okay.
you have some tissue?
I've had that issue since I've been hesitant.
Okay.
Nobody really wants to do it because it's they like to do it so much as they can up to the
I mean,
last
now we're gonna
minute.
wait for,
I understand that.
Jared. We good? All right. Good evening, and welcome to our regular meeting of the City of Villa Parks Council meeting. I hereby call the meeting to order. Jared, would you take roll call, please?
Yes. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilman Barnett.
Yes, present.
Councilman Colacott.
Here.
Councilman Nelson.
Yeah.
Tim Mills.
Here.
Mayor Fasenelli.
Present. Okay, today I'll ask Mayor Pro Tem Mills to announce the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yes, this evening we'd like to have the Troop 850 please have their honor guard present the colors and lead us in the pledge.
As we say the Pledge of Allegiance, let the American flag bear a symbol for our
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Troop 850.
Thank you. That was very nice. At this time, I'd like all those in the audience to please silence your cell phones, or if you'd like, turn them off so they don't accidentally go off. I welcome you along with the other council members here. We encourage your participation. If you wish to address the council on any item, we have speaker cards in the back. They're blue cards like this. If you would kindly fill them out and write down your name and your address and what agenda item you'd like to speak on. That way I can announce you when you come up to the podium. At this time, our first presentation is an update from the Orange County Fire Authority.
Mayor, council members, thank you for your time. My name is Chris Concepcion, Division Chief with the Orange County Fire Authority, here to give you an update. Since your last council meeting in January, we have responded to 30 incidents in the city of Villa Park, of which 24 of those incidents were medical aid. So 80% of the calls that we ran in the city of Villa Park were medical aids, which is about our average. Happy to report that our response time average was 5 minutes and 48 seconds to each one of those 30 incidents. So that's well under our response standard. There were no major incidents during the month of February. since the council meeting. So that completes my report. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I don't have a question, but I'd like to give a report regarding the fire authority. This Friday, I spent the day with OCFA. I spent half the day at the fire station here in Villa Park, as we all know, Station 23. And I spent the other half of the day at the fire station in Tustin. And I spoke with the people that work on the paramedic trucks, that work on the fire trucks, in detail regarding everything from politics to what they do, what they used to do, what they're expected to do, and then I also went on some calls that came in. The reason I did that, we spend a lot of time up here because it costs us a lot of money. It costs our taxpayers a lot of money to have our fire authority, and as everyone is well aware, pensions, benefits, and everything is skyrocketing, and we have to pay for that. So wanted to see what we got for it, and it enlightened me. What I saw was a very big difference of how firemen used to be and what they are now. What they are turning into is not necessarily someone who's going to save just your house from burning, but what they're turning into nurses. And as you can see, 80% of the calls that are made are, for some sort of a life-threatening event or what we think is a life-threatening event. There are paramedics now on the truck. There are a lot of issues that they deal with. So we can take our Villa Park station, which is wonderful. It's a 5-man crew. There's 2 paramedics on that truck alone. That's it. When we were called out to a 911 call, happened to be an infant that was under cardiac arrest, full cardiac arrest, I think is what the call was. Where we ended up going from our Villa Park fire station, we went all the way to Wilson and Tustin, which is where our post office is, because we were the first, this was the closest paramedic unit that could get to this infant. We pulled up and there's an infant laying on the ground. They didn't think twice about what they had to do. They didn't know what was wrong with this child, but they were prepared to take this child to the hospital. Ultimately, the child was fine. During that time, we had a paramedic unit from Orange come, Orange City, and take over, because they were able to get there. So what I found here is we have OCFA and a city fire department assisting each other. The first person who's closest to that incident is the one that's going to respond, and then the corresponding agency is going to take over. When I went to Tustin, there is a 4-man unit there. 3-man unit there, and they have a separate paramedic unit. We were called to a home where an elderly woman had a blood clot, but it was upstairs. She couldn't walk. She couldn't even get down the stairs with the apparatuses that they had. They had to carry her down the stairs. And we must have driven 6 miles. We were the closest, Tustin. When they serviced the elderly woman, one thing that they brought to my attention is they didn't question what was wrong with her. They didn't question that there was blood on the sheets. They didn't question if she had diseases. They didn't question if she had measles. They immediately went and they serviced her. So I was humbled by seeing that, and there was a difference in age, certainly. I had some kids that were 28-year-old firemen, and I had some firemen that were 60. And the difference in their ability to service us was very humbling. So I wanted to see what they do and wanted to tell you what they do. And the fire department is different these days. I'm not saying it justifies what we're paying for it, but that's something that started a long time ago, and it needs to be fixed. But it's good for all of us to know where it's going. And the words that I asked them where they thought they were going, they themselves thought we're more nurses now. You get more treatment from that paramedic than we used to get going to the ER, and you get it all in the first 10 minutes when they see you. So I thank you for opening up those men to me. They were very professional, and I learned a lot, and I certainly they invited the council if they would like to go see what they do and to ride along. They invited you also to give a call if you'd like to go see it. I think it'd be good for all of us.
Thank you very much for taking the time out of your, I'm sure, busy schedule to do that. The report that I received from the crews was that They really enjoyed having you out there. They like the fact that council members take the time out of their busy schedule to do that. And as you mentioned, the fire department really is kind of a misnomer nowadays. It really is. We're an all-risk emergency responder, and the firefighter nowadays has to learn so much more. They've got to learn about hazmat. They've got to learn about medical aids, as you mentioned, fires, and any other kind of emergency that the different multitudes of emergencies that we have to be prepared for. When I started my career 24 years ago, it was mostly medical aids and fires. And now, if you had told me that I'd be standing shoulder to shoulder with Lieutenant Gunzel and worrying about anti-terrorism and all that kind of stuff, and working so close with law enforcement, those are the things that we've evolved into. So there are many more things that we do rather than just fighting fire. So again, thank you very much for taking the time out of your schedule, and I open that invitation to the rest of the council.
Chris, I was actually thinking about trying to go Saturday. Do I talk to you or Jeff?
You can talk to me, and I'll take care of that.
I think I like to take a shot at Saturday, as long as you can promise
Saturday?
me none of the guys will throw me off the truck.
I guarantee you they won't do that. But I will. We'll get together after the meeting, and we'll schedule that.
I do have one more comment.
Absolutely.
One of the firefighters indicated to me whether I knew what 211 was. And I was a little ignorant as to what 211 was. I thought actually it was a Los Angeles benefit. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is? Because that's an education that maybe we can help promote within our community, because they do get a lot, the 911 calls do get a lot of people who have a stomach ache or a rash, or their heater won't work and they don't know where to sleep tonight. They get a lot of calls like that. So how could 211 help eliminate those 911 calls?
Thanks for asking that question. It's a great question. 211 is an information line for non-emergency issues. So if you have a question about, like you said, if your stove's not working, or you have a question about some ailment that you have, but it's not an emergency, you can call 211 and they'll put you in touch with the proper person, or may be able to answer that question right there online. What it does is it alleviates a 911 because it's not an emergency. So that number is for non-emergency issues that you can ask questions of, and they'll either answer the question there or get you in touch with the right agency.
Is that system implemented?
Yes, it is.
You know, they ought
been in place for a
to
long time.
publicize that some more, because, I don't know anything about that either, and
I've got some cards.
They had the wrong chief's name on it, so that's why I didn't bring them to
Right.
show them.
So I will. We have some cards, and I'll bring them to the next council.
yeah, that should be noticed.
And we'll
And
put 'em
that
out- we'll
service
put
is
'em out here in
also
the
for
city hall.
it's also for if you don't know where to go for mental illness, for aging, for homelessness. If you find someone on the street, that if you call that number, they'll direct you where to go. They can't help you, but they'll tell you exactly where to go.
Yeah.
So
They may be able to answer some questions, but most of the time they'll redirect you to the proper agency. Yep.
thank you.
By the way, I'm not into private jokes, so I'm thinking there may be some people out there wondering, what is Barnett nuts with that comment he made? Just so anybody heard my comment and wondered what was going on. I'm the designated rep to the Fire Authority Board, and I've been expressing some frustration over the last couple of years over the pension system. And it's created probably a little union tension maybe, and that was my sarcastic remark about throwing me off the fire truck if I ride it. So
We'll ask them not to do
somebody
that.
was wondering if I was crazy. That was the basis for that.
The firemen didn't know anything about your comments, so you're safe. Just so you know, you're safe when you get to
You
them.
had some comment
That was the fire authority, the board of directors.
Oh,
Madam Mayor, I've got a question.
Yes,
You mentioned that the additional training that firefighters receive these days, is that training that they get on their own dime, or is this provided during work hours as a paid activity?
It all depends. In different specialties, it would behoove you to, like for example, I wanted to be on the hazmat team, so I put myself through hazmat school back in the day, and so that I could eventually put in for the hazmat team. There are other people that we will, based on the need of the department, will put people through paramedic school, put people through hazmat school, those different kind of things.
So typically in this day and age, is the additional training like hazmat and so forth provided during working hours or as a paid activity to the
Yes, it is.
firefighters?
Yeah, yeah, it is paid. It is paid. It is paid activity based on the need of the fire authority. Yeah.
Thank you.
Can I answer your question? Okay, thanks.
And monthly update on our law enforcement.
Thank you. And if I could just kind of echo what Chris talked about with our working relationship, I probably spend more time with Chris and his partners up at our county EOC than I do here in the city, you know, sitting at this table. So, yeah, we have a great working relationship. This is something that has really evolved over the last several years, too. Okay, for the January 2015 crime stats, we're starting off the year on a good note. We have 3 Part 1 crimes. One of them is a residential burglary where a house is under construction and someone used a blowtorch to cut off the lock on the gate around the residence and entered and took construction equipment. The other 2 is essentially someone doing door checks, going from door to door, probably in the middle of the night when it's super dark and that street is completely black, and found 2 unlocked vehicles going door to door, driveway to driveway, essentially. Both cars were unlocked, minimal loss, but a loss none the least. You know, someone was leaving coins and things in a car and then glasses. So that's basically what those two petty thefts were. But that's all I had to report for this month. So I wish every month was 3.
Well, I should report here that Tuesday, I went on a ride along with the Sheriff Department in Villa Park, which I can tell you is not an e-ticket ride. So it was, the only thing worse would have actually been doing it at night. So it was.
I suggested to send you Stanton. They didn't want to do that.
Yeah, might have been good. The mayor's Greek there. I would have liked it. So I met Officer Muir here, and he explained to me how the system works. And then we took off in the car and we drove. We drove the city. I have to say, I was impressed. His eyes saw things that I didn't see. He knew the cars that were, the majority, cars that were supposed to be in front of the residence. He knew that it was a domestic worker's car in front of a residence versus a home health person's car in front of a residence. There were people walking their dogs. He drives the car with his window down. He knows who they are. They're regular dog walkers from the city as well as outside. They're paid dog walkers, and they're walking 3 and 4 cars. They don't live here, but he knows their name, and he knows who they are. He stopped and he talked to construction workers. This particular one, he pulled up the car because somebody was parked in front of a fire hydrant. He knew it was one of the workers. He asked him to go inside and find him so he could move his car. He was observant to the vehicles as they were driving. Scared me a little bit because we did make a few stops. One of them was a car that was at a stoplight, and he started to back up, just in his lane. There's a girl behind him, and he turned on his lights, made a U-turn, he followed him, he stopped him. But in addition to doing that, what I didn't see was that he saw some vapors coming out of the car at the same time, and I didn't see that. So there were other things that his eye was a little keen to see. One of them, he gave a ticket down on Taft. I didn't think you could give a ticket to the last car in front of you. There were, a word to the wise here, this was the 4th car in line, and she got the ticket because the radar works both ways. I learned a new lesson. And he did. So I was impressed with who he knew, what he knew, and the attention, actually, that was given. Did I find it long and a little boring? Sure. You know, we made 3 stops, gave 2 tickets, spent a lot of time looking at cars parked on the street. He looks for cobwebs.
Did you take a kid on a go-kart?
No, that wasn't me.
Oh, okay.
No. I know about that one, was not me. He knows of cars that are sitting on, we get calls all the time, the car hasn't moved. Unless we get a call to say a car hasn't moved in 4 or 5 days, the sheriff doesn't come out. But he knows the cars that haven't moved. And he actually runs the VIN number on them to see. And he did that while I was there. Was it registered? Cobwebs all underneath, but guess what? It was registered. The tag wasn't on there, and it belonged to the home that it actually was in front. So did he give a ticket to it? He didn't, because the car's been there. Could be an elderly relative who's not driving. It could be an out-of-stater. But he's well aware of the cars that are supposed to be there and not be there. So I was impressed with that. He did show me the new computer system. Went from paper to computer. Used to write stuff down. Now everything's in the computer. He has it on there. He gives his citations. He makes his calls. And then he pulls over and he writes everything in there. So everything's computerized now, which
You see his electronic citation?
citation, issued a ticket with a little handheld device. I personally have received one of those also. Makes it nice and clean, and it comes out. It's a little printer, and the citation comes out. But I was impressed with the service that he did give the city. There's not much to do, but he knows who belongs there. It was a very quiet day also to do that, but I thanked him for showing me what you do, at least on a daily basis. It could have been a little more of an exciting day, but I'm glad that it wasn't.
Yeah, and I'm glad you say that, because Deputy Muir does get kind of a bad rap, because
Yes.
he's pretty black and white about particularly traffic enforcement. But there's so many other things that especially on day shift, and he's worked here a long time, so he does know. And just speaking from experience, I worked here for a number of years on day shift, and you get to know whose car is his, because they're the same people, same cars, and he goes the extra effort running out plates and doing things like that. I didn't have a computer when I was in there. So, yeah, he does an excellent job, and I love having him. So.
He was very kind. During that trip, unfortunately, my daughter was sick, and I had to pick her up from school, so he was kind enough because we were by there, and I didn't have a car, so he picked her up. Unfortunately, she had to go in the back seat because I told her that I would not give up the front seat. So she sat in the back with her eyes a little teary going, I don't think I like this, which was a great experience for a 13-year-old. So I thank
Hopefully
her for
the
being,
last time she's in the back of the
it
car.
best be the last time, yes. But thank you for the opportunity
Yeah, no
to
problem.
do that. It was very
If you
nice.
want to ride and stand, just let me know, and I'll get you up with that.
Okay, thank you.
That's a neat ticket. Any other questions?
Yeah, but before you leave, I want to compliment Lieutenant Gunzel. The sheriff's union recently had the deputies to rate their bosses, and Lieutenant Gunzel came in the top 10 in lieutenants in the sheriff department. So he was the kind of guy that people.
Let's strive to get higher next time. So.
That's wonderful. All right, at this time, this is where the members of the public may address the council on any item that is not on the agenda. So if there's an item on the agenda, if you would pull your card and wait until that time, that would be great. You are limited to 5 minutes in speaking. And at this point, we are going to call Lori Cherney. And after Lori, we'll have Vince Rossini come to the podium.
We do have our fancy 5 minute timer.
Okay, timer is sitting on our city manager's desk there.
Where did you get that?
Last for 4:30, yellow for 20 seconds, so it's 30-second warning, and red will give you a 10 second.
I think we should add some time for laughter.
Right.
A
laugh
few
track.
minutes to stop laughing and get yourself composed.
$12 is better than $1,200.
If we could see it, that'd be great.
I wrote it down to try to compact it, so I'm going to rip through it.
Okay.
And then if you have any questions. Okay. On Monday, February 2nd, I went to the city hall about a parking issue in front of my house. I live next to the Torres construction site on Valley Drive. The street has been no parking any time since forever. However, since the Torres construction property has nowhere for its workers to park on site, the city set up parking with orange cones on Valley. In the beginning, the workers parked mostly in front of his house, but as construction continued, the vehicles moved up and down in front of my house and the neighbor on the other side of the property. I have a half-circle driveway, and they started parking trucks and cars in front of the little island between the openings. This became a problem for us exiting. The vehicles parked in front of Torres' house on this side block the view up the street. We have to pull out farther to see if cars are coming down. This in turn puts the front end of my car, or our cars, in the right lane. The cars coming up can't see our car when a car, but especially the truck, when someone is parked in front of the island. I have almost been T-boned 4 times now. I explained this to Jared on my visit. He seemed to understand. He should, as he allowed the other neighbor to keep his no parking zone with a sign and cones. Said he would look into it. That construction would be done on the house in about a month. Mind you, this was February 2nd. Still going strong as of today. Okay, satisfied. I waited, but nothing. So on Wednesday, February 4th, I went back. Jared was not present, but I spoke with Bill Tarrant. This is when it went bad. When I inquired about progress, the first thing Bill said to me was, "They can park there." As the conversation continued, he stated that he drove by and there was no truck there. And supposedly the day he drove by, there was a car there, but not a truck. Since he felt the car parked there was not an issue, and told me to use my lower exit, which by the way is even worse because it is right at the blind spot curve. He was gruff and seemed angry with me. I think he thought I was just nitpicking, but as I said, it is a safety issue. He became more agitated. His hands were shaking. He looked like he was going to explode. I became upset as he was not going to do anything about it. I told him about my neighbor who got permission to put a no parking sign in front of his house, but Bill said, "I don't know anything about that," in a very angry tone. He got defensive as he was telling me how I did not know. He said, you don't know how much I'm on the phone with, I assume, the Torres, or over there at the house, what he's been doing, yada, 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 which has nothing to do with the problem I was there for. Finally, dejected by his tirade, I said, "What do I have to do? Get my lawyer?" And his answer was, "Yes, go ahead, get your lawyer. Your lawyer can come here and talk to our lawyer." He was very, very angry. I was very, very upset. On my way out, I said, "If this was happening to your family, you would be doing what I'm doing." And he replied, "Yes, you're right." Unbelievable. I just want this taken care of. The city made the parking available in front of my house. They can take it away, because if I get T-boned, you guys are going to be liable. And nobody wants that.
Thank you.
You know, don't take this wrong, but I think you should seriously consider recording children's books. I thoroughly enjoyed that, and that kept me awake the whole time. You did a great job.
Right. Mr. Rossini? And after that, I saw Mary Beth. Mr. Rossini, thank you.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members. I'd like to first thank you for your service. Oftentimes it's a thankless job. I come to you with some concerns about kind of the nuts and bolts operations of the city. And given my experience working for the City of Los Angeles and working closely with the City Council and Bureau of Street Resurfacing on street resurfacing needs in Los Angeles, I wanted to echo some concerns and bring some things perhaps to light. I live on Valley Drive, and I'll be honest with you, the condition of that roadway is absurd. It obviously has not been looked at, addressed. It's kind of like the land that time forgot, and it needs serious attention. As a means of comparison, not as a personal dig or anything like that. I've been to my closest councilman's street over, I think it's Rosano Drive. I would love for my street to look like that. That is much better condition. And I think that's the kind of thing that we, as residents on Valley Drive, deserve. That's what we pay our taxes for. I'm also very, very concerned that we don't have any curbs and gutters. I think that particular issue is incredibly important and needs to be addressed, because if you don't address street resurfacing needs on a regular basis and the underlayment deteriorates over time, the cost to then redo and resurface roadways is 2, 3, perhaps even 4 or 5 times as much as if it's on a regular cycle. and I think it needs to be looked into immediately, and I'm very, very concerned about that. We are one of I should say a few streets that does not have curbs and gutters throughout. I think that is long, long overdue. And speaking with a number of my neighbors, they're very, very concerned about that. They're very interested in getting that done. Folks that have lived here for 40 years, folks that have lived here for 1 year. It runs the gamut. We have a tremendous, I'd say, divergent age group on our street now. It's changing, and it's high time that the city steps up to the plate and starts taking care of some of our needs. The other issue is undergrounding our utilities. Our city is a beautiful city. Our city has an excellent crime rate, thanks in large part to the Sheriff's Department. It's very, very low. But there are some issues, and not related to crime, but the fact it is a great city, we need to think about undergrounding our utilities for safety's sake. One of my first visits to the city, during a huge windstorm, there were utility lines down all over the place. It's high time that we take the city, bring it into at least the 20th century, if not the 21st century. The days of having power lines above ground, they're over. There's no reason why we can't step up to the plate and have a public-private partnership to get it done. There's interest in the community. I think that the interest rates are low to do that kind of thing, and let's get it done. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
Does the public recognize we can't comment on this stuff?
Good evening.
Hi.
I would like to give an update on the Sereno Avenue School Traffic Safety Task Force. We are still meeting with OUSD, the school PFSOs, and City of Orange staff as needed. We've completed our 4th meeting, and we have selected a handful of ideas for further study. When I say we, I mean the residents, the PFSOs, OUSD. So it's a group effort. Our goal was to select ideas to fix the streets, that fix our problems that are feasible, meaning they work within the laws of the state of California and guidelines. They're cost effective and can be implemented perhaps by the next school year. Our goal, now these ideas, no one idea is going to work for fixing the problem. It's going to take some ideas implemented by the City of Villa Park, some of them by the City of Orange, some of them by OUSD. However, we are currently working with the staff at Villa Park. They are helping us with the City of Villa Park ideas. What we're going to be looking for to this council is help in influencing OUSD and the City of Orange in taking action on the ideas and for solving our street problem through their city. So we're making progress. We're doing the due diligence that's necessary to make these real solutions. But we're getting close to the point where we're going to be asking for the assistance of the City Council. We'll keep you up to date. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else out in the audience who has any public comment on an item that's not agendized? Okay, we're going to close public comment at this point.
Before we start, Mayor, our agenda items, if we can have Megan report on closed session.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The council met in closed session for significant exposure to litigation, and there's no reportable action. Thank you.
Thank you. Our first item of business tonight is to consider appointments to the Villa Park Community Service Foundation. Do we have anybody here to speak on behalf of the foundation? Any board member? Okay. What we have here then is we have a listing of director appointments. And it appears, I'm going to turn this, who went to the foundation meeting? Did you?
I went to the foundation meeting.
Would you report to us what occurred? How's that?
There's, I think there are 4 vacancies, 3 of them that they would like to fill with continuing the appointments of existing CSF board members. And one additional one, Crystal Miles, who they'd like to have attend the March meeting just to get a better feel for what the Community Services Foundation is all about before we recommend appointment.
Okay.
So what they would like us to do is go ahead and appoint the slate that they've proposed in the agenda package.
So we have Rich Ulmer, Joe Cooley, and Kay Rogers that would be serving another 2 years, and it would be ending December 2016. And it says here that Nick Versailles, who is our assistant treasurer, has resigned, but they want him to continue on.
On a month-to-month basis until a replacement is found.
Okay, all right. And Krista Myers, I did speak with her today, and she's been a treasurer of several PTAs and of nonprofits, and has done this before. So this may be an opportunity for somebody to replace Nick.
Okay.
So next time you have a meeting, maybe you can report that.
Yeah, I've not met Crystal yet. but-
I've met her once, yeah. So maybe you can bring that up, and that'd be great. Do I have a motion?
I'll move the staff recommendation.
And I'll second that motion.
Point of order, council. My wife is on this list. Should I recuse myself?
She's not being appointed though.
We're
She's on
looking
the
at this list here, yes.
Oh, okay.
She's not up for a
She's
reappointment.
not up for reappointment.
So-
Okay,
don't have
all
to.
right, we'll make sure, okay.
Thank you for asking.
The motion is to, as the members of the foundation receive the recommendation by the board of directors and appoint the directors as stated in the staff report. Councilman Nelson.
Yes.
Councilman Colacott.
Yes.
Councilman Barnett.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Mills.
Yes.
Mayor Fasenelli.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Okay. Item number 3, public hearing. Is there a motion to waive reading in full of all ordinances and resolutions on the agenda?
I also move.
Second.
A voice vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries.
All right. Our first public hearing tonight is to consider a conditional use permit, variance requests at 10521 Potter Circle. Jared, who will be providing the report.
I will have Jennifer provide this report, Madam Mayor.
All right, Jennifer?
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. The item before you is a request by the property owners on Potter Circle for construction of a new detached accessory structure in the rear portion of their property. The reason why they have to come forward with conditional use permit requests is because, as you're well aware, in the city of Villa Park, anytime we're exceeding 4 garage parking spaces, that requires a conditional use permit. In addition, this request is to add an RV parking inside of the garage, and our code requires that any garage door that exceeds 8 feet in height also requires a review of a conditional use permit and approval by the council. This request also is for a 2-story structure, and any detached accessory structure exceeding 15 feet in height requires a conditional use permit. In addition, we do have a variance request with this application, and the variance is for the rear portion of the property. This property is unique in that it's at the end of a cul-de-sac, and it abuts the Water District property. For about 48 feet in length of the rear portion of the property, the Water District has taken about 5 feet of this property and has added that to their property. So in order for this property owner to maintain that 10-foot setback that's required typically for a detached structure, they'd actually have to move the structure 5 feet away from that shorter portion of their property, and then the part that's not shorter would be 15 feet away from the rear yard setback or rear property line. So that is an unusual circumstance that really is only related to this property. So in any time that there was a variance request that met the finding of unusual circumstances only being able to be applied to one property, this would be that property. The applicant, in addition to doing the bottom floor garage, the second story will be for a residential unit. And again, that is completely allowed by our zoning code. So the only conditional use permit request is for the garage space, the garage door itself, and the accessory structure over 15 feet in height. It is important for me to note that our code does allow two-story structures in this zone. It is the E4 zone. You're actually allowed to go up to 27 feet in height, and in some cases 30 for architectural features. But we have this funny little provision that says if you're detached, 15 feet is the maximum without the review of the council. And that's really to take into consideration how those detached structures affect adjacent property owners. Again, because of the unusual design of this property being kind of a pie shape where it gets wider in the rear than at the front. On that rear portion, it's the furthest away from any structures that would be immediately adjacent. And you can see on the screen right now how that looks with the neighboring property. And then obviously the most adjacent.
Is your pointer?
Oh, there it is. Perfect. The most adjacent property would be the Water District property, and obviously that's not a sensitive neighbor as you might have if you were immediately adjacent to another residential property. So when it comes to this request, we did meet with the CDC. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention, the CDC was in favor of approving all 3 conditional use permits and the variance request. And so tonight before you, we have a resolution for the approval of the requests that are before you. Happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Are there any council members who have any questions of staff?
I have one. Any opposition, any objections at all?
We have not received any comments.
Oh, I have, thanks.
Have the neighbors been polled about this?
We did send out notice.
And there's no response?
No response.
Okay, fair enough.
I'd like to open up public comment, and I have a Barry Roddick. Excuse me. Hi. Thank you. If you'd like to come to the podium to speak. Thank you.
My name's Barry Roddick, and this is my casa. And thank you, Jennifer, for all your help and everything. But anyway, it is kind of a unique piece of property, and I canvassed the whole area. I think we had to notify 31 residences, and I probably spoke with at least 10 of the neighbors, and nobody had complaints. And we even had to notify the people out on Catella, which is on the other side of the Water District and everything. So we had no complaints with anybody. So I'm glad I read and saw that they're asking you. They approved everything. I am a graduate of Villa Park High School back in the 60s. I don't know how many of that can say this in here, but I've been around for a long time. So anyway, I thank you for your consideration, and hopefully it'll pass, and onwards we go. Thank you.
Anyone else to speak on this matter? We'll close public comment, and we'll bring it back here. Any discussion? I move to approve conditional use.
Second.
Permit.
Motion is to adopt resolution number 2015-3315, approving CUP number 0763, 0764, 0765, subject to the conditions of approval, and variance number 0762. Councilman Colacott?
Yes.
Councilman Nelson?
Yes.
Councilman Barnett?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Mills?
Yes.
Mayor Besnett?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
We're going to move to public hearing, agenda item number 5. This is a conditional use permit request at 17859 Santiago Boulevard regarding the reinstatement of the use of a telecommunication facility and the allow to remove and replace existing antennas. Okay, Jared, do you have a report?
Yes, I'll ask Jennifer to register.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. As you'll recall, we have an existing telecommunications facility right out that door that has been in the town center since the late 80s. Early last year, the applicant came forward and requested that that conditional use permit be taken away and the telecommunication facility be moved to the Bank of America parking lot. That request was actually approved. It was for a much taller tower that would accommodate co-location and would still be a tree kind of camouflage to screen the tower itself so that it would fit in a little bit better with the surroundings. However, the applicant contacted us a few months ago to let us know that the deal on that property didn't move forward and they wanted to come back to their existing tower and be able to upgrade the facility with the new equipment and also upgrade the stealthing capacity to make it look more like a nice, full, robust tree rather than the little bit of a sad tree that it's turned into. So tonight we have a request to maintain the existing facility. As you'll recall, when we met with you last year, there was some discussion about the structural soundness of the existing tower. We have gone through review of the plans with the applicant and our structural engineer to ensure that the plans will be suitable and that the tower will be able to not only facilitate the new equipment, but also be able to facilitate the stealthing fronds of the tree. So with this application, you will be disengaging the CUP that was approved last year. So we won't have a CUP that's live and active on the Bank of America property, and you'll be reinstating the previous approval for the conditional use permit that is, again, right across the street. The reason why that's important, just for the audience benefit, is conditional use permits typically run with the land. But last year when the applicant came forward, they did ask for that conditional use permit to go away. So that's why they're having to come back to reinstate this conditional use permit. We did meet with the with the CDC, not the CUP, and they were in favor of this application. However, they were very interested in ensuring that the stealthing was actually meeting that condition and making sure that it did look like a nice, full, robust tree. We've included in the staff report some concerns from the past about co-location, about looking at other locations where the tower could be, and also different stealthing options, towers, clock towers, light standards, flagpoles, and other types of trees. But tonight the request before you is for a pine tree, and we have included a condition that not only would it be a good stealthing option when it's installed, but that as the tree weathers over time, that the applicant will ensure that the color and the stealthing properties will be maintained so that we are ensured that the facility will look in character with the town center as it ages. Happy to answer any questions for you. With that, we are recommending approval of the conditional use permit.
Yes, I have a question. How much influence do we have over this tower in the long run? Are there any laws coming up that will preclude anything that we could do to dissuade them from moving it or actually even influencing how it looks?
That's a good question. The city there's a few federal laws that apply to wireless facilities, the Telecommunications Act being the main one that people know about, because what it did was that act says local governments, you can keep your zoning power over wireless facilities except for a handful of things that you can't do. So you can't deny, for example, a wireless facility because of its radio frequency. So that was the 1996 Act. In 2012, there was the 2012 Tax Relief Act, which had a number of things in it, and one of the things it did was it addressed wireless facilities, and it said that there were a few things that would require approval. It sort of took away the city's discretionary power to review wireless facilities. They have, under that law, they have the right to replace existing facilities. So if there are antennas that need replacement, they can replace those without coming back to the city council and asking for approval. That law was vaguely written, and so earlier in January of this year, the FCC put out new rules that specify more specifically how that applies. So basically, if they're replacing something on that facility that does not result in a substantial change, as that term is now defined, and there's a number of factors that apply. If there's no substantial change, and they're just replacing something, they get to do that without coming back to the city council. That is federal law that will control. If they are adding additional antennas, they would have to come back and seek approval.
So what would happen if we don't approve this?
Well, that's an option. The basis, we would want to make sure the basis complies with current laws to why we would deny it, but they don't have an existing CUP because they asked for it to be revoked last year.
Would that not constitute a sufficient reason?
Just that they don't have one? No, I mean, they're seeking an application, so we have to provide a reason as to why they're not entitled to their application. We have to have a basis for
Well,
it.
I mean, nothing like they were so uncooperative before, but I guess that's not enough, of course, but,
Well, let me give you a reason. Going back to the background from last year in January, and this was from your staff report, and I'm going to read it. The current tower is old and in need of improvement, both visually and from technology perspective. AT&T determined that the existing pole is not structurally capable of holding the new antennas and was in need of replacement. So since this was January of last year, I did hear you and I did read that they've submitted plans that all of a sudden it is structurally well enough to put these 3 panels on there. So what has happened between January of last year and now that all of a sudden it can hold the antennas? Do we know?
So what went into the review was their structural engineer had to provide justification like we would for any structure in the city that showed how it's been constructed, how it's anchored to the ground, and also what's happening underground. So soils reports were also required that would show how the anchoring is sufficient to meet the load that they're putting on the tower. Based on the information that was provided and some of the conditions that our structural engineer responded back to, it was determined that what they're presenting today is sufficient. And we did take into consideration also the additional branches that will be added because that is different wind load than is there today.
I understand what they gave to you. I am having a really hard time understanding that a year ago they said they couldn't put anything on there, and all of a sudden it's in great shape and they can put antennas
I'll be
on
quite
there.
frank, this sounds very fishy.
I'm going to open up public comment.
Should I ask a question
Yes, of
first?
course.
City Attorney, would the fact that they already have a conditional use permit for a new location over by B of A, would that constitute adequate grounds?
They're entitled to seek additional conditional use permits. If, for example, the city council didn't find that the stealthing that's proposed is sufficient, that's something that the council could consider for a denial. Aesthetics is something that regularly is considered by councils when considering wireless facilities. But arguably the proximity of a pre-existing wireless facility would be a valid basis. Although in this case, they have the permit, but they haven't actually installed the facility. So it's a little different.
Don't we have some legislation coming out that's going to seriously constrain our ability to perhaps disapprove this in the near future?
Those are the FCC rules I was talking about. They came out in January. They were published in January. They'll become effective the first week of April. They
have preemption issues?
Those rules, though, are really, there's already existing law in the books under this 2012 Tax Relief Act. So those rules are just specifying more clearly what is meant in the 2012 Tax Relief Act. So the rule's already there that, and arguably that they, if they wanted to replace something on a pre-existing tower, they'd be entitled to do so without city council approval. Now, the important caveat there is that that requires a legal existing tower, which is not what we're talking about with this tonight, right? There's no permit to operate the wireless facility that we're talking about at this point. So that rule wouldn't apply in this scenario.
It doesn't usurp our authority with regard to putting up a new tower or bringing back an old one that...
Yeah, those are talking about modifications to existing facilities. So we're not talking about a legal existing facility as a result of the revocation that occurred last year.
So isn't our authority limited?
So we are entitled to review the permit and decide whether or not we want to grant the request.
So is our authority limited?
So we are entitled to review the permit and decide whether or not we want to grant the request. So we are entitled to review the permit and decide whether or not we want to grant the request. So we are entitled to review the permit and decide whether or not we want to grant the request. So we are entitled to review the permit and decide whether or not we want to grant the request. So we are entitled to review the permit and decide whether or not we want to grant the request. So we are entitled to review the permit and decide whether or not we want to grant the request. So we are entitled to review the permit and decide whether or not we want to grant the request. So we are entitled to review the permit and decide whether or not we want to grant the request. So we are entitled to review the permit and decide whether or not we want to grant the request. So we are entitled to review the permit and decide whether or not we want to grant the re
Let me open up public comment, and then we can come back for some more discussion. I have Mr. Albert Sandoval. Am I correct? Hi. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor, council members, city staff. My name is Albert Sandoval, 10 Pasteur, Suite 100, Irvine, California, and I'm the applicant for this conditional use permit. I understand that the existing tower has seen better days, I should say, but in AT&T's view, they want to make the aesthetics of it correct what is already in place there, and by what you mentioned about the structural design, there was the existing tower. The existing tower that's there would not be able to support additional equipment. So this design that we're proposing for this conditional use permit is a technological update. So and the documents that are provided, the structural analysis, the SOLS reports to Ms. Lilly and the planning staff, they support the equipment that is being proposed in the plans. It would clean up the aesthetics also to provide a more integrated look. The fronds, it would integrate more into the natural landscape. And it would also continue to provide service in the local area, not just in case of emergencies, but all around to provide the data that everyone uses quite often. So everyone enjoys having the high speed, the connections, and so forth. And AT&T just wants to ensure that that continues.
Are there carriers allowed?
On this monopole here, at the current state, no, because it's not suited for that.
Okay.
And that was when the conditional use permit was issued in January. That was primarily the reason that was provided, is that we would have to have a taller cell phone tower, which was 65 feet, and we were allowing it to 75 feet, which would allow other carriers to come in, because that was something that would increase your business, increase ours. That's not happening now. So all that I see that's happening now is, oops, we lost our lease over at B of A. B of A doesn't want us over there. Now we're going to come back here, and over here a year ago it said it can't hold antennas, and miraculously the antennas can be held. And it's not a new tower. You haven't done anything to the existing tower. So did new technology exist in making these steel antennas between last year and this year to hold it?
With the new design, it was designed for the upgrade. And
the new design, let me make sure, the new design of the antennas?
Of removing the existing antennas that are on there and placing
Because the pole's not, you're not asking to remove the pole.
Correct.
But the pole was not structurally capable of putting anything new on. And that's the part that's bothering me here. And I understand you don't want, you're stuck without a pole. I get it. But you're not making it any better either, because you're not asking to increase the size of the pole. It's 45 feet. So nothing, I'm not sure what's going on here, but from last year to this year, not much has changed. And what I'm afraid of is with new legislation coming in, pardon me for being so frank, I feel like something's being slipped in here where come April, you're going to be able to do whatever you want with that pole and you don't have to come back to us. And that's what's concerning me.
Plus the fact that you won't be able to handle any other carriers to increase the service for our Villa Park residents and the close Orange residents as well.
Correct. Now, the other pole that was proposed last year, that was at a height of 65, which was extended to 75. And
we give you 75 feet.
Yeah, ultimately, yeah. And the intent was for future co-location of others.
Yes.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that fell through. Yeah.
You know, I have two questions. One, I'm just going to reiterate the mayor's comment, and that is, what has changed between last year and now that all of a sudden this pole is adequate? What was the deficiency before, and what have you done to it?
The existing weight of the panel antennas and the equipment that's on there.
Excuse me, could you speak up a bit?
Yeah, it's hard to
I'm sorry.
I've
the
lost the
existing
hearing aid,
weight
too.
of the panel and the equipment that's on there, and the proposed design would be to remove that and replace it with newer models, which would include technological upgrades. So that's and it was designed with the pole's capacity in mind.
So the new equipment is lighter than the old equipment?
I don't have that information here, but it was designed specifically for that, and we provided structural analysis to which indicates that as well.
You're going to add more flora to it, right? More branches, et cetera.
Correct, and everything was taken into account to make sure.
Including the new wind shear as well?
The wind shear is the fronds, the branches, and so forth, and to incorporate the stealthing design.
Okay.
I have to agree with the mayor. It does seem a little fishy that this thing that was unusable and inadequate and had to be replaced, now it's good and we can add more fronds and more wind resistance and now it's fine, but.
Well, has AT&T considered putting the 75-foot pole on another location in the city of Villa Park?
Ideally, the proposal was to stay right there because it's already located there, and it would be based on the radio frequency necessities of the area.
Can they put a bigger pole there where that pole is?
No, there isn't enough space, unfortunately.
That was the problem.
How much space is required?
It depends on the size of the pole and the width, and to ensure that the soils would be able to support it.
I guess, of course, a taller pole would be a wider base, correct?
Yes, and we'd have to make sure that the soils would support, as I mentioned.
It's pretty rocky here, so the facilities people and utilities call us Villa Rock, so I think that's an issue.
Is there anyone else here for public? I wasn't aware you were the applicant when you put this in. Excuse me. Is there anyone else from the public who would like to speak? You don't mind? And I may call you back up to answer some questions. Is that okay?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Hi.
Good evening. My name is Jack Stevens, and I live at 9601 Feather Hill Drive in Villa Park.
Welcome.
And I don't know anything about the structural integrity, and I'm not going to speak about that. But what I do know about is I have a wireless phone, and AT&T provides the service. And I can tell you that the service is really marginal at best. And the signal oscillates from non-existent to weak, and it's just in general very poor. And I've thought many times of dropping AT&T service because it is so terrible at my home. And so I would like to see you talk about the signal strength that's going to be available when they continue the service or change the equipment. And if possible, I'd like to see you that there would be some kind of requirement that they increase the signal strength. And if necessary, raise the height of the pole or do whatever is necessary. But I mean, you could talk to other people, and I'm sure they have the same problems I do. The wireless signal is really very poor, and something should be done about it. And this would be an opportunity for you to force AT&T to do something. Either upgrade the signal, like I say, I don't know what. I'm not technically competent about that. But this is the opportunity to try to do something so we have a better signal in Villa Park.
Thank you. Seeing nobody else from the public at this point, I'm going to close public comment, bring it back up here. And Jennifer, I have a couple questions here. I've heard that they did provide you with some structural engineering documents that say everything's great. I feel at this point that we need to do a little bit more research. I'd like to continue this to actually see whether or not those engineering documents, I think we need to look at them again. I believe it's come in a little bit under the time frame of this legislation, and I'm not comfortable continuing on with this. I think we need to do a little bit more research. I'm not sure if my council members here agree with me, but I've got some issues with something coming in that's going to lock us into not being able to change it. And we certainly want better service here. I mean, we were willing to give them a 75-foot pole, and we still are. But this doesn't do anything for us right now. So those are my comments.
If I could just clarify as well, we don't have any documentation that shows that they wouldn't be able to go to a taller height. Whether or not they'd have to replace the pole in order to do that or do something else to make the existing tower structurally sound, we've not been presented the information to verify that they could not go taller. So I just wanted to clarify for the audience, there was a point made that they can't, the city's not aware that that's accurate. We have also been approached by other processors for AT&T that have presented other alternatives that could be considered, including other locations. That's obviously not the request before you tonight. It's not what we're reviewing, but we have been asked if we would be interested in other locations, other heights, co-location, and knowing that that's been the council's direction, we obviously were very interested in that, and we're not excited to see an application come forward that was simply to replace what we have today. On the other hand, just to be clear as well, since I got here 4 years ago, that tower has been an issue in terms of compliance with its conditions, and trying to bring that application into compliance has been a game of we pursue them for implementing the condition, and the request back is they're going to apply for revisions to their existing CUP, so they'll be upgrading it. I've been here for 4 years, and we've not seen that pole be upgraded or the stealthing brought into compliance. So I very much understand the council's concern, especially given the clarification in the law to say that as they move forward, they can do things without coming back to amend their CUP. So I take your point and making notes as you continue to give us direction.
And another item was when we did ask for different stealthing items, we were given mono pine and regular pine, whatever it might be, eucalyptus. And since then, I have forwarded to you numerous places in Irvine where you don't even know this is a cell tower, and it's a requirement that they look like your clock tower, or they look like your roof, or they look like the flowers. And it's there, and AT&T does that all the time. And they do it all over Irvine because Irvine requires it. And it's okay if someone wants to say, I don't want to spend the money, but they told us they can't do it. So we have a little history here. Maybe we can work a little bit on this and get some better cell service.
Mayor Fasenelli, I support your comments, and I'd move that we continue this.
Table this for now?
I have similar concerns because it appears to me that the existing facility is probably adequate. Certainly they're making that representation now, and it's my sense that they used that as an excuse to move on to the other tower, and that it was probably stable, and now it's a backtrack. So to get some investment in this and to help the city and perhaps help people that are not on AT&T as well to get some reception here, I have to concur. I think it requires a little more looking. So I would.
Yeah.
Council?
Take the time to do it right.
Right.
Madam Mayor, if the council's will is to continue the matter, procedurally what we want to do is continue the matter to a date certain because of noticing issues related to CUPs. And so the next council meeting is March 17th. So I'd recommend that the motion maker include that within their motion, that the matter be continued.
I'll include that in my motion.
And if the council desires at that time to continue it further because we don't have all of the information we're seeking, we can do that at that time.
Second.
I'll second.
Again, it's going to be March 17th, which is going to, for the benefit of the public, be an adjourned regular meeting. Typically, it's on the fourth Tuesday of the month. For March, we're going to bump it up 1 week due to the birth of my son. So that way I can be here at your meeting. I don't want to miss that. So anyways, continue until March 17th. Okay. Councilman Colacott?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Mills?
Yes.
Councilman Nelson?
Yes.
Councilman Barnett?
Yes.
Mayor Fasenelli?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Didn't know that.
Moving on to agenda item number 6, public hearing. This is to consider ordinance 2015-592, amending the zoning map relating to specific E4 properties and clarifying their designation.
I will ask Jennifer to provide this report, Madam Mayor.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, tonight the item before you is a zoning map cleanup. The important determination here is we're not changing zones We are not instituting new zoning on any property, and we're not changing any development standard related to any of the properties on the list. What we are doing, however, is bringing properties into compliance with our zoning code. They probably had no idea they were out of compliance, and frankly, neither did the city in some cases. How this happened, our zoning code is written so that our E4 properties are required to have a minimum lot size of 20,000 square feet. Every now and then, when properties are subdivided, tracks are put in, you'll see a subdivision happen, and they, maybe they have 100,000 square feet overall of land. They divide it up and think, oh, we'll have 5 equal properties. But once you get roads in there and sidewalks and otherwise, you end up with less than 20,000 square feet. The way that our zoning ordinance is written, that's perfectly acceptable in the E4 zone, so long as the map has an indication after the E4 designation as to the number that's directly correlated to the minimum lot size. So a for instance is, if you wanted to allow 19,000 square feet lot size rather than 20,000, you would have the zone be E4 parentheses 19. That would indicate a proper lot size. We also have the same determination in our R1 zones, and we have a number of properties that have different numbers identified behind the R1 zone, identifying anywhere from 8,000 square feet up to 14,000 square feet in size in the R1 properties. However, in terms of our mapping for our E4 properties, there's been no such mapping cleanup over time. So it's really an administrative issue. So if I can pull up the next slide, we're starting with the first handful of properties that we have identified as being out of compliance with the minimum lot size of 20,000 square feet. And part of this has come from inquiries that will come in from either new home buyers or real estate agents or appraisers that come in. They look at the assessor parcel map. We go through the map with them and identify that, in fact, the lot size is less than 20,000 square feet. It doesn't seem like that should be a big deal. However, when a property is identified as non-conforming with the code, there's a provision in the code that says that that property can't be rebuilt to the current standards unless it conforms. Well, you can imagine if you have a 19,000 square foot property, it would be very difficult to turn it into a 20,000 square foot property unless you were able to acquire additional land around you. So the only way to make it conform is to clean up the map, which is what we want to do tonight. So if these folks are in a property that's non-conforming on paper, an appraiser may write on their form they have a non-conforming property. That indicates to a lender they can't rebuild. That can create challenges with financing, with selling a property, and all sorts of things. So we don't want to have these issues for our residents, especially inadvertently. This really wasn't an intentional problem that they created. This was simply an administrative mapping problem. Now, we've identified for you tonight about 47 properties. There are more, but we wanted to start with a handful because we didn't want panic throughout the community, and we wanted to kind of educate you on the process before we went out and identified every single property that's out there. Also, we've learned through this process that some that are identified are actually misidentified. Our records may not be as current as some records that a property owner may be able to show. So they may come in with a survey that they've had of their property and actually identify that they are over 20,000 square feet. So when we produced the notice that went out, not only did we do our typical notice to property owners that generically said, hey, these are all the properties that we're considering, we also sent a letter to every property owner on that list saying, if you believe this has been an error, please call us. One such case, a resident called and said, well, I have more than 20,000 square feet. I just had an appraisal, and they said I have more. We went through, we did all the measurements. It kept coming up under, kept coming up under. We talked to the property owner, and in fact, what's happened is the appraiser said, oh, you're indicated to have 0.45 acres. So we're just going to round that up, or 0.458 acres, excuse me. So we'll round that up to 0.46. Well, that's just enough to make them over 20,000 square feet, when in actuality, when you do the real math, they're just under. And that's the exact example that I want to illustrate, because that appraiser decided to round up, somebody else decides to round down, and you could have an issue in the future. So cleaning up this mapping exercise really takes away the ambiguity and the challenges of interpretation down the road. What it doesn't do is it doesn't change anything for the property owner. So even if there's someone on here that we've made an error in the math and they actually have 20,001 square feet, if we put a 19 behind their property, nothing changes for them. They're still allowed to be there just as they are. Development standards still apply just as they would, and everything's fine. And just in case somebody does the math differently in the future, they comply. So as you see on the screen, we've identified for you all of the properties that we're bringing forward tonight. Again, to be very clear, nothing changes in terms of zoning. All we will have now is a map that will, on each of these properties, have a number behind them. Now, taking this forward to the CDC, and if you go back, can I move the screen? Thank you. So if we go back to this list, and I apologize to the audience that you won't be able to read all of the numbers, they're kind of tiny, but we do have properties on here that get into 14,000 square feet in size, and in some cases 7,000 square feet in size. However, they're still in our E4 zone. Staff would be recommending that we still move forward with the change to identify them properly on the map. The CDC made a different recommendation where we would make those changes tonight only to the properties that are 17,000 square feet and above, and we would leave the ones under 17,000 square feet alone for now. Again, that's how they are today, so the CDC is correct. There'd be no negative implication compared to what they have today. In staff's opinion, we'd like to bring them into compliance just in case there's any confusion out there for these property owners. And the reason why CDC had that recommendation is what these properties really require is further policy discussion by the council. Because they are less than the 20,000 square feet, but they're still required to meet the development standards of the E4 property. So for instance, with the 7,000 square foot lot, that property is still required to have a 30-foot front yard setback, 10% of the property width to be set back on each side.
Jennifer, can I stop you for a second?
Yeah.
What's up here is not what's in the agenda. This, because we end at 46. So I just. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, just so you know, that's why I'm looking at this, not.
My apologies.
Yeah, we end at 46, so for
Okay.
purposes of our discussion here in the
It does
public.
average to
it's
47, though.
We got to say 11,400.
Sure, we'll talk about the
'cause that's a huge
11,000
difference.
then. Thank you. So in either case, you're talking about a property about half the size of our typical E4 lot. And so for those properties to be able to meet our development standards would be much more difficult. And we don't know, based on the information we have, whether that was intentional or not. And so it could be that the city council at that time said, well, fine, if you want to subdivide less, you can put those numbers behind you, but you're still going to have to be as less dense as your neighbors. But it may have been an oversight at some point, and there may need to be a policy decision to have some kind of in-between zone. That's a technical term. And rather than our E4, which is less restrictive, and our R1 that is less restrictive, and our E4 that's more restrictive, we might want to come up with something in between that allows for less setback in the front and side and rear to accommodate some of these smaller properties. That's not a discussion we wanted to have tonight, and the CDC agreed that it would be good to bring some of the properties in compliance and have that policy discussion at a later time. So tonight, before you, we have a recommendation from the CDC to move forward with just the properties that are 17,000 and above. If you chose to take the whole lot, again, we would just put the number behind that property and we could still deal with the policy discussion at a later time. And that would bring all of those properties in compliance with the zoning map. With that, I would be happy to answer any questions I'm certain that you may have and go back over any information. That
So
would be
basically, this is good for the residents.
This is good for the
This is
residents.
what, okay. This is simply an issue of administrative cleanup. How many other properties have you identified out of the 1,700 houses here in town?
We probably have about 200 total.
Okay,
There's a lot.
there's quite a bit.
Of the properties that you've identified on this list, particularly the larger ones that are almost 20,000, have you verified that they are indeed less than 20,000?
Yes, and I apologize. There is one property that came forward, and this is at 19065 Ridgeview Road. And they were able to show through a survey that they have kind of a little extra piece of property that wasn't shown on the original assessor parcel map that we had record of, but they also had a tract map, and it shows that they are at 20,038 square feet. So they have passed the mark. And their neighbor has 20,001. Love that.
Do you think that we've given these property owners that we notified enough time to maybe speak with their neighbors, ask us questions that they themselves may want to investigate if their property is larger than what we have here? Because, you know, you've got an assessor over here who, you know, added 0.6. Well, whose property did he take when he rounded up? So this is good for them, but on the other hand, I want to make sure that everyone knows how big their lot is.
Yeah, I think that there should be some, some notice going out to all these folks. If that's, and the reason for that, in my own neighborhood, a couple bought a house, and they put up a cinder block wall. Well, it turns out that the traditional fence, which they based that upon, was 8 feet away. They had to deconstruct the whole thing and rebuild the whole wall. And I am sure that some of these properties that there's probably a meandering wall line or fence line. That you know, some of these are probably not what they think they are, and I think you've already said that caution.
So let me be very clear. We're not changing anybody's property size. If they come in 5 years from now with a survey that says, you identified me as 19.8, I'm actually 20,000, perfectly fine. They're 20,000. All we've done is we've changed their designation on the map to allow them to have a minimum lot size of 19,000 square feet. So
for R1 rather.
For E4.
For E4.
These are only E4 properties. So what that means is that in order to be allowed to build on the lot, they'd have to have at least a 19,000 square foot lot. They could have a 25,000 square foot lot, but they'd at least have to have 19. So there's no risk to the property owner for us to add this designation. And if there's an error and they really don't like the 19 being there, they could come back to the city and say, you were wrong, do another administrative cleanup and take the 19 away. That would be as simple as it would have to be. So we're really not taking any property away. We're not changing their boundaries. I'm sorry if you get your tax bill and it says you have over 20,000 square feet. We can't give you a reduction in your taxes. But what we are doing is ensuring that down the road, nobody can say you can't build on your property because you're not compliant with the zoning map. That's the assurance we want to give the property owners.
So Jennifer, on the 7,000 square foot property, if we mark it 7,000, I presume it's sitting in the E4 zone and people think it's an E4 now. Is that what we're doing? Okay. So it's a 7,000 foot lot, and we now transition it by putting the 7,000 next to it, and we legitimize its E4 status. Doesn't have any negative effect on the 7,000 feet either, does it?
It doesn't. And important to note is all of these are built properties. We've not identified any of these as vacant properties. So we're not affecting the development ability of any of the properties on this list as well. So you're exactly right. Those folks are already meeting the E4 development standards. If they're not, we have a different non-conforming issue, not a mapping non-conforming issue, and we'd have to deal with that anyways down the road.
However, your recommendation is that we just go ahead and authorize the change to all of the lots that are currently in the E4, designate their size and validate them.
At this time, yes.
However, what the CDC recommended was that we only redesignate those lots that are 17,000 square feet and larger. Again, the concern being, let's say you've got this 7,000 square foot lot, it still has to meet all the setback and other requirements of an E4 lot, which really impacts if, let's say they want to do, you know, a remodel on their house or something, it can really impact their ability to do that.
But they're already E4 now, so there's no downside. They're already
They're grandfathered
designated as
in.
an E4, and they've got another problem if they want to make a change, because then they'll have to deal with their current E4 classification and their noncompliance.
Well,
Am I right?
as Jennifer pointed out, we were hoping not to have a detailed discussion. What we're hoping to do is address those that are, you know, that are close to 20,000, in other words, 17,000 or larger, and give some further consideration to the smaller lots as to, okay, how can we best deal, you know, provide the trade-off between the E4 designation and the impacts of, you know, the E4 designation on a smaller lot and the restrictions on what people can do in the future with their properties.
So if we made the transition and put the number on it and validate it now, what does that do as far as backing up if we want to consider some of these smaller ones? Does that constrain us, or if we turn around and make the same change and adjust it again?
It's essentially 6 of one, half dozen of another. You're either going to change it today and make them compliant with the map, and nothing changes in terms of the development standards, or you're not going to change them and make them compliant with the map, and you're going to have to deal with them down the road. Either way, we're going to have that policy discussion down the road. The difference between the two actions, one brings them in compliance with the zoning map and takes away any ambiguity for development for them today, not meaning that they have to come into compliance with anything, but if they wanted to get financing and they ran into a barrier because of that non-conforming status, we will have taken that away. If you don't do it, nothing will change for them. They'll stay out of compliance, and the odds, I'm not sure. If they are facing an appraisal or something like that, I suppose we could take an action as quick as we could to bring them into compliance so that they wouldn't have an issue.
So as I understand this, you feel that it's better off for all the residents, including the ones in the smaller properties, to go ahead and have us validate the E4 so they're in compliance, and then if we want to make some policy changes to assist them down the road because of the smaller lot, so be it. This doesn't prejudice our ability to do that.
Correct.
Okay, so.
I'm gonna.
Could I ask one more question? How did this all come up?
Well, as I said, there's been several ways. I want to say it was in my first week. We had somebody come in and they were adding onto their property, and first thing we do is we look at the assessor parcel map, and I'm measuring the lot, and I went, okay, they don't have a 20,000 square foot lot. That was kind of day one. In addition, we will get phone calls from appraisers that say, hey, I'm appraising this property. They're only a 17,000 square foot lot. That means they're non-conforming, right? And then the third is SCAG did a wonderful mapping exercise for us, which you cannot see, I apologize, but they mapped every property in our city, and they provided in color the different square footages, and we should see the majority of our properties on this map in the color pink and purple. And if you look at this map, you can see about 50% of the city is in this blue color, which would mean 14,000 to 18,000 square feet in size, which would not align with our E4 zone. So back when Tyler was here, if you remember, I made him painstakingly go through and measure every single one of the lots and confirm that with the assessor parcel map as well as any track maps that we have on file. And we started compiling the list of every property that was out of compliance.
Okay.
May open up public comment, and we can bring it back here. I have a Mrs. Carol Stevens and a Mr. Jack Stevens. I'd like to come up to the podium.
My name is Carol Stevens, and I'm care about property located at 10282 Center Drive, which is on your non-conforming list. I have many questions. The first thing is, the agenda number that you gave us is not the same as your agenda number that we're talking about. And this was probably just a typo error. I think you have 2015-593, and this is 2015-592. And
I'll have to confirm that. My paperwork in front of me shows 592.
I have
Ordinance number.
I have 592 also.
Yeah. Public notice 593, and on this it's 592. Just probably a typo error.
Oh, do we have another piece of paper that says 593?
Madam Mayor, it may have been on the public notice that went out, and that could have been a typographical error, although the notice still provided the very intention of bringing residents out. So we're so glad you're here tonight.
I just want to make sure I'm talking on the same one.
We have 592.
And as you said, you have about 200 properties that are non-conforming. And I know how thorough council meetings are. They go over everything, and I'm wondering if maybe 40, 50 years ago, they went through this and they had a reason why they were called E4. Because from 7,000 to 20,000 square feet difference, you can see that with the eye, you know, so there must have been some reason that we're not aware of, and I don't know if you can go back through your records. Are you going to give us a survey of our property when you tell us they're non-conforming? I mean, you said you've done the work. Will we get a chance to see that survey?
Well, we haven't approved them doing anything at this point, so that's not something that we can.
One of the things you talked about was the building size that you're allowed in setbacks. Have you made a chart, a comparison chart? If you're 20,000 square feet, you have to be set back 30 feet, but if you're only 18,000, what are the requirements, or 16 or 14? So that people can look and see what are the advantages of being reclassified. I would think, just from what little I know, that being reclassified with somebody looks at our property, that would decrease our property value, going from E4 down to R1. I would like to, like I say, see a comparison chart to see what we gain by becoming R1 or whatever designation you give us, and what we're giving up. For one thing, when we bought our property, we bought it because it was horse property. It had a corral on it. At one time, there were 3 horses on it. Now, if you take me out of the E4, will we still be allowed to have horses? Will we still be allowed to have farm animals? What do we lose? What do we gain? And I'm sure if you've got 200 homes, they will be asking the same question. So you should have a chart, comparison chart, so that everybody can have the same answer rather than having to answer each individual homeowner separately. Are fence height restrictions the same? Block walls, wire fences, chain link? What about the amount of grass you must have, or dirt space, or cement? Can you have the same amount of cement? What is the percentages? That is what I would be concerned with.
Thank you.
I think that's it.
Thank you very
I'll
much.
think of something else later.
Thank you. And Jack Stevens? Did we lose our light? Our cute little light?
Okay, we've owned our property at 10282 Center Drive for, I don't know, probably at least 35 years. And the house is in excellent condition, and we intend to keep it. We do not intend to sell it. And my son is interested in moving into it someday. So I anticipate that this property is going to stay in the family for at least 50 years. I'm very, very, very much in favor of the council going ahead and approving the suggested ordinance so that we look like we're in conformity. I see absolutely no drawback to it, and I see lots of problems if you don't do it. So I don't really want to have any issues. And any concern that somebody has that the setback might be 8 feet instead of 10 feet or 25 feet instead of 30 feet is relatively minor, as opposed to my property not being considered conforming. So the first thing I would love is if your council decides to go ahead and approve the change. And then after that, you can go ahead and work on the setbacks and see if you want to modify them, which would only be good for us if you do. But even if you don't, I can live with that, as long as I have a buildable lot, because my son may want to, tear the place down and build himself a brand new house. Now, our house is located on Center Drive, and there are several lots in the same size of roughly 14,500 square feet, 100 by 145. And we're not the only lot. I know our neighbors are that size. And one of the neighbors, I think 2 doors down, built a brand new home. And it's quite large. I don't know how large it is, but it's quite large. And I don't think his lot is any bigger than ours. And he could live with whatever the setbacks are, and so could I. So I'm really, as I say, I'm not concerned that much about it, but I want to keep the E4 zoning. I just want you to go ahead and approve it and put the little remark in parenthesis about my size of my lot. And I beg you to do that.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, I want to close the public comment session.
May I add, since I didn't use my whole 5
I need to reopen public comment. Yeah, let me reopen public comment. Can you step up to the podium so that way the residents can see you on the television?
Okay. This is a PS. Our home was built, it's 60 years old, which is considered quite old by California standards. If my son does move into it, he will probably want to rebuild. And of course, we don't want to be restricted in a smaller size or something of that nature. I imagine when the houses on both sides of us are resold, they will also be torn down because the homes are very dated. And that's something to consider.
Thank you.
Thank you. I promise I won't get up again.
Thank you. All right, we're going to close public comment and bring it back here to the dais. I have a question. I happen to agree with the Stevens. I happen to agree with, these are homes that we have treated. They are E4, but they're not 20,000 square feet. I'm not sure that I particularly care for the first 46 being designated tonight, because what about the other 100, and 50 some? I mean, lucky for the first 46, it gets taken care of if the council approves tonight. But how did we come up to this priority of these 46 coming to us today instead of all of them?
So, Madam Mayor, thank you so much for the question. And if it would be okay, once I answer you, I'd like to address a few things that the Stevens asked as well and invite them to come and meet with me. I'd love to go over this with them in more detail, as long as you would like. No 5-minute limit. So if you look at the map, it's somewhat strategic what we brought forward tonight. We wanted to spread the wealth, and we wanted to kind of raise awareness around the entire city. And so we picked for this first round strategically different neighborhoods so that the word would get out and people would start talking to their neighbors and they would come down to City Hall and ask the question. There is a famous phrase that the best way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time. This is a big project and we're attacking it one bite at a time. And we didn't want to bring, as I said in the beginning, all 200 in at once and have confusion. And we heard some confusion tonight over changing development standards and reclassifying our zoning. And we wanted to really start off with a manageable few where we could explain the process, really work through it with the CDC, the council, and the residents, and then move forward with the remainder. And we could bring the whole remainder all at once next time. We don't anticipate taking years and years and years to finish this. We wanted to bring it forward to you to kind of see where the council was headed. And if this lot goes through as we expect, then the next round will go even easier, we believe. But we did really want to spread it around the city so that the folks that are misclassified down south would start the conversation up north, east, and west.
These are homes I have always been designated E4. I'm not somebody who would support redesignating somebody's property to a E4 2.5 or E17, whether it's 6,000 square feet or 7. I think the city's old enough that if it's been E4, lucky them. you know, if you have a 7,000 square foot home at that point, because I think we're going to open ourselves up to a lot of problems here. I happen to support 46 that was on the agenda, not the 48, but would like to suggest and actually make a motion to move the 46 and then come back next month with the rest. I don't want to see this take 90 days, 120 days.
I have a question. Sorry. On number 40, on Lips Lane, that's a new house.
Correct.
And so that's why that can be done, because it has this designation.
Right.
The only reason why. Okay, because it's a very small lot. All right.
Right, right. And again, it's been staff's understanding based on, and I appreciate the point raised by our resident, whatever history we could find, and I agree with the mayor, the intention was for these properties to be E4. It was never an intention that they be zoned something else based on any records we can find. Now, there's not records on everything, but there were track maps that have been approved with the same development standards, with the same zone. So we're fairly confident that we understand the historical intention. And so you're exactly right. Even when a new request comes in, because we've been working on this application, that's how that has moved forward.
I see. Now, with all of this, I need to ask the other question about, you brought up, Mrs. Stevens, about the horse properties. Now, where is that line?
So our zoning code actually has very specific information about the keeping of livestock and how big your lot needs to be in order for you to have multiple animals. But she's exactly right. E4 properties are allowed to have horses and actually other livestock. And then the code goes into specificity as to how much square footage you have to have compared to how many animals you could have. So again, nothing about what we're doing tonight changes that. They were horse property before, they will be horse property after tonight.
Okay. Second.
Okay. A couple of these two for number 40, they came in with the CUP 5 or 6 years ago and got approved, and it was recognized that it was substandard at that time. Motion was to, let me go back to my notes here, to move all 46 and then come back with the rest next month.
Correct.
Before you take that, Madam Mayor, if I may, can your motion be to state the ordinance title? Because to waive the reading in full, we need to actually state the title.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, the motion is to approve ordinance number 2015-592, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Villa Park, amending the zoning map relating to specific E4 properties, clarifying their designation.
Second.
Councilman Colacott?
Yes.
Councilman Barnett?
Yes.
Councilman Nelson?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Mills?
Yes.
Mayor Fasenelli?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Moving on to public hearing 7. Yes. And we have nothing in our binder, so this is a surprise.
Is this the big package?
This is a surprise.
Is this the big wad that we
No,
have in here?
no, there's nothing.
No, we talked about this one last time.
This-
We'll talk about it again and then bring it back here Monday.
So we're having a discussion.
Why don't we have anything on it?
Oh, no, we don't.
We have some photos.
Oh, I remember this. Yeah, I
We
remember
went out
this.
to canvas neighborhood,
Okay.
brought forward some photos for you. No, it doesn't work. So just
Oh, okay.
actually hand me the little flash drive. That's it.
Flash drives all over the place down there.
All over.
Jump drive,
High
thumb
tech.
drive,
Popcorn drive.
Throwing
USB.
things. There we go. Okay, so as you recall, we came to you in November with this issue that faces our city. Our current code restricts anything within the first 20 feet of the front yard to any structures, excuse me, to 42 inches in height. So when we talked back in November, we said, gosh, that really seems to be a challenge for some of our community, whether they want to put a fence or their mailbox or a trellis. We get to tell them no quite often. It's not until you're past that 20-foot mark that you can go up to 6 feet in height. So we talked to the council about how you would feel about maybe looking at changing that, but without really specific direction. We met with the CDC and we also had the same discussion, and part of the feedback we got from both council and the CDC when we brought this up was, well, let's see what we're talking about. What kind of images are out there? So tonight, for your information, we've brought just a handful of things for you to take a look at. So you can see in the slide in front of you, we have a column feature, a block wall, and then also wrought iron fencing. All of this is within the first 20 feet of the property and is exceeding 42 inches in height. I would like to add a caveat as we go through these photos. This was not meant to point out any property. We are not pursuing any code enforcement. There's no issues here. We just want to bring examples so nobody panic if they see their home on the screen. Also, we have not looked into whether these were issued with permits, whether they were constructed before the rules were in place. This is simply for illustrative purposes tonight. This item is actually very dark on the screen, but to the left of the screen, you'll see a very tall tree and also a mailbox and retaining wall or block wall feature. The reason why we chose this image is it's important to note that the way that our code is currently written, landscape features are also restricted to 42 inches in height. So essentially everyone that has a tree within the first 20 feet of their property in our city today is out of compliance with our code. We have never enforced that very obscure section of our code and required people to cut down their trees or move them back 20 feet. And obviously one of the things that we will be recommending as part of this code cleanup is removing that landscape restriction. Here you see a couple of examples. Closest image to you on the right bottom of the screen is a fence with column features. This is essentially at the front property line, but you can see it's a very open fence, wrought iron with the exception of the columns that are in between the wrought iron features. On the top left portion of the screen, you'll see a light fixture to the left of the truck, as well as the column fixture and lighting on top, all clearly above the 42 inches in height and within the first 20 feet of the property, so would not be considered in compliance. Again, two different gate features here. This is at the front of a property with a solid structure and then an entry gate. The closest feature on the right-hand lower bottom corner there is just barely over 42 inches in height, but again, a more open kind of a picket fence look. Here you see some more decorative walls, so they're not really meant for security fencing, but more just decorative features. Again, set back a little further from the street is illustrated in the photo on the top left side of your screen, and then essentially to the front property line on that bottom right-hand feature. But we wanted to present to the council, again, those different options of how do you feel about these features when they're not completely walling off a property? How do you feel about them when they're more open? How do you feel about them when they're meant to be more decorative? The items before you now, we see on the top left-hand side a more solid wall, really meant for screening and security purposes. And then the bottom right-hand side, you're seeing entry columns for the driveway with light fixtures on top. Again, not compliant with our current code, but not really screening off the property and creating that walled-off look that is partially the intention of the code. And again, a similar type of a feature on that top left-hand side with the columns meant more for the walkway side of the driveway. And then on the bottom right-hand side, you see the wall. That would be a security fence that actually rolls across the driveway on that bottom right-hand side. So that's right at the property line, or it might be a foot or two set back and clearly over 42 inches in height. But the fence itself, besides this one portion, is more than 50% open, wrought iron, somewhat decorative in nature. And then these fences, in many cases, run the full perimeter of the properties. Top side, again, you're seeing that more open feature with the columns in between. Bottom side is showing the fences, again, that run right across the driveway, providing that security and breakup from the street. And again, similar views of how properties are fenced, open fencing and more solid fencing as well. The top left-hand side, you can't see great from where I'm sitting, but that's actually a wood fence. So again, showing the council a different type of design. When we talked before, there was some consideration for materials that might be used, or if it was more open, or if it wasn't a surrounding block wall. So we wanted to show you some examples that are out in the community today. Again, the top left-hand side shows a fence that goes across the driveway, clearly over 42 inches in height, but is really, more than 50% open, gives that opaque look to the street, but still provides that security fencing. Bottom right-hand side, while some of the fence features may meet the 42 inches in height, once you're getting into the columns and the lighting on top, you are exceeding that height restriction. And then last but not least is the architectural features that we talked about, arbors, trellises, and other design features that are being added to front yards, in addition to mailboxes and light standards. All of these features are currently non-compliant with our code, but maybe something that the council would want to consider. Again, the challenge that the code presents is balancing the desire to have that open rural look in our community, and yet allowing the residents to have design features, have lighting fixtures, and also provide some security and differentiation amongst their properties. So, points to consider this evening for discussion. You can see we don't have an ordinance before you. We wanted this more to be discussional in nature. One would be consideration of removing the landscape limitation. I always believe that whenever we have a rule we're not really enforcing, that maybe we don't want to have the rule. Again, I don't believe it was the council's intention to not allow trees in the front yard and to require bushes to be maintained at 42 inches in height. That would not preclude the city engineer from ensuring that proper line of sight is maintained with landscaping as well as fencing. So that provision would still be maintained even if we took that landscape limitation out of the code. And then the second point that we'd like to consider, which we think is kind of the simplest solution in this case, is adopting the alternative development standard based on neighborhood conditions to apply to this features in the front yard, rather than determining kind of in general for the whole city, well, maybe we'll allow 42 inches unless it's 50% open or unless it's decorative in nature. You may say instead with an alternative development standard, we'll look at your neighborhood. And if every house on your block already has a fence and you can show that they're within X amount of feet from the front yard, we'll consider that the existing condition and kind of the prevailing code. And so it would be allowed for your property, where on another neighbor's lot where no one has a fence and no front yard decorative features, you would say, no, that code or that neighborhood doesn't comply with that standard. The next item we would want you to consider is direction to allow architectural features. Again, because this isn't about breaking up that line or creating properties that are walled off from one another, but what would you consider appropriate arbors, trellises, mailboxes, columns, and lighting? We think that those features are different than fences, and the code perhaps should treat those differently. And then what we heard from the CDC and from the council before is that this would not change the code to allow 6-foot-high solid block walls across every property in the city. So we're not looking for that consideration as we move forward with the ordinance. So with that, I would be happy to answer questions, and entertain some discussion. We did bring this to CDC. They did give us some very good input, which actually provided some of the direction in the points to consider this evening.
So I agree with you that we would like to be less restrictive. And this is a property rights city. We want our residents to have a lot of freedom as long as it blends in well with our neighbors. Usually the neighbors are pretty quick to give their judgment on what you're doing. So I don't think there's any issue there. But do we have to do much with the code the way it is? I mean, there's so many things that are already existing when there was code. Over here on Center, there is a block wall that is 8 feet high. And it got passed somehow. I don't know how, but they worked on Saturday and Sunday too, I guess. But anyway, it's there. And of course, we were not going to make them move it. But how do you make this more fluid so that, I mean, we don't want to give carte blanche to everything either. So what's the recommendation that you came up with so far?
So the alternative development standard is really the most fluid option that we have to present to you, because it doesn't restrict the community and it doesn't kind of pigeonhole the council into saying, well, today we allow 42 inches, tomorrow we'll allow 52. It's kind of a random number, right? And that doesn't seem in line with even the question that you're asking. So instead, by applying an alternative development standard process, you're telling the applicant, show us what your neighborhood consists of. And we've done this with variances, right? Yeah. So we'll have a cul-de-sac where there's 5 homes on the cul-de-sac and 4 of them already have 6-foot fences across their driveway. Don't ask me how they got there, they got there. So we say with the 6th one coming in, is it really going to change the character of the community? No, because the other 5 are already there. That's essentially how the alternative development standard process works. It allows the community to prove their case to the city manager. It delegates the power to the city manager, although he could direct it to the council, and it allows them to say, my neighbor has it, 10 houses on my block have it, we're all at 10 feet away from the curb, I should be allowed to. So the case that you bring up on Center is what we get presented with every day at the counter.
I bet.
Well, how come my neighbor can have it, but the code says I can't? Our hands are essentially tied at this point. And while in the past, variances have come before the council, it's really not a great process because we have to make those legal findings for a variance. And it's very unusual that we can make those hardship case findings, because if your property looks just like your neighbor's, we can't let you do something through a variance that your neighbor can't do. Where with the alternative development standard, we can.
So can you take what we already have and just add that line at the end of it? That's basically it?
That is how we would do it.
That sounds kind of reasonable to me, but I think we'll need to poke some holes in it.
I have a question, and correct me if I've missed it someplace. On Friday, I went into a social environment here in Villa Park, and I got bombarded by residents before I got in the door. They were angry that there was something on the agenda that was in the Orange County Register that we were approving 4-foot fences within no setback. And I didn't know what anyone was talking about because my book didn't have that. So
it was in the paper. I saw it.
okay, and I looked. So I'm asking because I was told by the residents what we were talking about and had no idea. And obviously, when I looked, there wasn't anything here. Okay, so just to give you an idea, I had 3 people very angry at me because the first thing they thought of is they were going to have walls in front of the home. So I feel that this is obviously an issue that the residents are going to need to chime in on because they're going to talk about it. I realize that we have homes that, there's gates, that, there's no secret that I don't care for gates. And there's gates all over the city. But I also don't want to restrict people where if you have one cul-de-sac or one street that has cute picket fences in the front and the street over hasn't spent the money quite yet to redevelop their property, and that one lone person wants to put a picket fence up, but nobody else yet has done it because they haven't refinanced their house, and she can't. So there's pros and cons to that type. Since I've been on the council, we haven't done very many variances. You've educated us. And it hasn't been an issue. I think we can explore it. But we're kind of towing the line here on a little homeowner association, on some guidelines. You know, we live in the city because we can paint our homes a different color. Most of us will paint it the proper color. And that we could put architectural features up there that we feel the majority of the people are like. So certainly it's a topic for discussion. But we're at the baby stages here.
Madam Mayor, if I could just respond to some of the concerns that you heard on Friday. The rule already exists today that you can put a 42-inch fence in your front yard right on the property line today.
Right, and they were
with no provision for the type of material, opacity, nothing. You can build a solid wall 4 feet or 42 inches in height today. So the discussion that we're having instead is within that 20 feet, would we allow other things that exceed 42 inches in height, including fences, because of that very reason? And I will say from a personal experience, I actually made a homeowner cry for the first time ever at the counter last week because they wanted to put a taller fence in their front yard. They live on a street that they feel is busy, and they didn't feel that 42 inches would be sufficient for their children's safety. And when I told them that they had to set it back 20 feet, and they showed photos of other homes in the area, and I said, I'm very sorry, unfortunately it doesn't apply to your property because the rules, they were distraught and very upset. So it doesn't come to council very often because we don't give the homeowner much hope that a variance will be allowed, because really without the legal findings, we don't want to lead them down a costly road that won't result or could result in them not gaining approval. But we do face it quite often at the counter, and it does create frustration amongst neighbors because, as Councilmember Mills pointed out, this property can, you're telling me I can't, and so we end up with the weekend warriors putting things up without us knowing. And
so what are you asking of the council this evening? What is it that you're, are we supposed to?
So the points behind you, Madam Mayor, are kind of the outline of what we'd like to move forward with your direction to bring back a draft ordinance. So the draft ordinance would include language that would remove the landscape limitation. It would include language that would allow you to have an alternative development standard process in place. And it would include exceptions for architectural features. And it would not include raising the 42 inches for solid walls. But what we are asking for tonight is a little more direction on those architectural features and to make sure we're hearing you properly on these other items as well. What we're not quite clear on is the architectural features, if you will be agreeable for us moving forward in that ordinance for 6-foot high tall arbors, or really if people are going to walk under things, they need to be 10 or 12 feet high, and where that line would be that those could be.
I think, and I'm speaking for myself here, that I would be more comfortable in cleaning up first whether we're an E4 property or an E419 property before we take on the aesthetics of somebody's house. You know, it's a little, we've got one end of the code that is not correct, and that applies to if somebody wants to build something. So before we can say, hey, you can't build a 48-inch fence, maybe we should make sure that we classify their property properly. And that's just a side note I have here.
I think you said the right words, though, about the walls, or fences, rather. Some are solid fences, and that's what you get into with how well you can see through it. And that's been our guideline with the gates so far. And so if there's something that we can be done on that vein, I think that's appropriate. Obviously, we want people to be secure with their children in the front yard. I mean, after all, the police and fire do a fine job of keeping the streets very safe here, exceedingly safe. But the fence business is difficult because everybody has their own tastes. So I think the mayor's correct that if you could maybe we've let this cat out of the bag, and obviously it was out last week, that we are looking at doing something to make it easier, actually, for folks, that it should be presented that way, not a restriction. Actually, we're looking at loosening it up in reality. Because we like to have everyone fix up their yards, and it keeps the property values of everyone's parcels at a premium, per se. So if you come up with some language, that would be great, Jennifer.
Jennifer, I like your ideas, and I think in reality it is a loosening up. I don't think we have to present it that. I mean, it is. I think it's going to come across that way regardless. I'm not too concerned about the mayor's E4 concern. I just don't see that's much of an issue. I don't think there's really anything changing with E4. It is what it is, and everybody's staying the same. We beat that to death pretty well. So to me, that's not much of an issue. The only one I have a concern with, I think, is the alternative development standards. And here's my concern. We may get one little area in the city where 4 people pirated ugly wood fences up, and now somebody, next door wants to put another ugly fence up. So what we get is we get a little spot with some pirated fences, and now we're in a fight with everybody arguing about what's prevailing, and hey, the 3 next to me are already like that. And I think we look at this more from an overall city perspective and try and keep a nice quality aesthetics in the city. I also don't like, the city or a property owners association going crazy with people and telling them how to handle their yard, especially in Villa Park. But, it seems to me the balance would be, as you put, maybe get rid of the landscape limitation, and the rest of those suggestions, the alternative development. I'm just thinking perhaps if you could put some standards for open view, 60% plus open, 70%, whatever is decent, and keep it, if it's going to be over 42 inches, then, as long as it doesn't go over X inches and X feet, and as long as the majority of it's still open space, then the city manager or staff has ability to approve it. And once it gets beyond that, then it starts to get a little iffy, and then maybe it's time to go back to council. Maybe we have a carve out for, a non-costly way. Maybe we drop the fee or something on these type of activities. Hope we won't have too many of them. But I don't want to bill people a ton of money to come in just because they want to, do something a little different with a fence, which in fact is going to be very nice and probably expensive for them. I'm not real anxious to stick them with a big fee. I don't know what we can do on that, but that's kind of my thoughts. I mean, I think we could set parameters where we could say, look, if it's not over this tall and it only eats up this much visibility, then let's let staff have the ability to approve it. If it gets beyond that, then maybe it needs to go to council and have them take a look at it. Other than that, I agree, and I think that's still a loosening up across the board.
I have a question for Lieutenant Gunzel. When you're patrolling, are these fences that are solid up at 3.5 feet, is that a hindrance?
It's a hindrance as far as what they call septic crime prevention through environmental design, certainly. If you have any place, including bushes or hedges, where people can hide on your property, it's not well lit like it is here at night, yeah, of course it could be an issue.
Okay.
Terrific. That's
Public comment.
Time for a motion?
There's no motion.
No motion.
There's no. This is just
Oh, that's
it's
right.
just
I'm sorry. Yeah.
discussion.
What I understand that the staff is just looking for direction on this issue. Isn't that correct?
That's correct. We've gotten some great direction. We do have this as a public hearing item, so you may want to open to see if anybody's here.
I'm really in favor of what the staff has recommended here. I do share Rick's concern about the alternative development standard, about some pirated peoples on some streets setting the standard. But it does seem a way to deal with some of these issues. I'm certainly think we should drop this landscaping restriction, and that we ought to allow architectural features.
Great.
But I think most of the fences, as you indicated, should not be block walls. If they're going to have fences, should be at least 50% open or more.
Let me open it up to, is anybody in the public would like to speak? Open up public comment. Seeing none, we'll close it. And have we given you a little direction?
Actually, it's terrific direction.
Okay.
Okay, well, you can start with that and
Cool.
maybe come back to us next 2 months. Because
Jared,
next month is very quick. It's
you
only
gonna
3
cor-
weeks.
cor- You going to correct Rebecca on yeah, our council agenda item?
Yeah, do you, did that maybe come from the CDC agenda items? There's a lot of items that are appearing in the Orange
Well, there's
County
in
Register
Thursday's
that are
paper.
not being heard here. We're not quite sure where the information's being, how it's being
That
transmitted.
did not come from the CDC.
That wasn't on
No.
that
Oh,
agenda?
no.
Yeah, so I'm not quite
Oh,
sure.
not,
Wouldn't have.
But,
not from
okay.
our agenda.
Madam Mayor,
got that from?
if I might, I don't want to belabor this point, but because I want to let this person go home for the evening, I'd like to introduce to the council and to the community your new planning manager for the city of Villa Park. With me tonight is Mr. Ray Pasqua. Ray retired out of the city of Placentia as the director of planning in Placentia many years ago. He has been working with the Lilly Planning Group now for several years and has served the communities of Irvine and Costa Mesa, and most recently he was acting director for the city of Rancho Santa Margarita. This will be my last council meeting. We can talk about that all later. But Ray will be serving you from this point forward, and I am very confident that you are in incredibly capable hands. And despite what he saw tonight, it's usually a very light agenda for planning, but we did want to move some of these items forward and give him great direction as he starts in the month of March. So I hope you will welcome him, and I know he looks forward to serving the community of Villa Park.
Well, thank you and welcome. Thank you. And yeah, today it's been a good meeting. We look forward to working with you. All right, so we've given you directions, and at this point we have a request, council members, if we could move up item 19. We have, I was unaware that we had anybody here on that, so I apologize for that. I didn't know that was occurring. Unless we have any objections, can we move item 19 up?
Move it up, sure.
Yes.
Sure.
Is that-
No objection.
Okay, all right. At this time, we're going to hear agenda item number 19, letter in support regarding the transfer of Orange County Sanitation District Local Sewer Area, number 7 to the East Orange County Water District. Jared.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. We've had a request from the East Orange County Water District. I believe it was presented through the Serrano Water District.
Yes.
Correct.
Excuse me. The East Orange County Water District has submitted a reorganization application with the local Area Formation Commission that, if approved, will transfer the Orange County Sanitation District Local Sewer Area Number 7 to East Orange County Water District. Through the Orange County Sanitation District, the City of Villa Park has approved this transfer and already endorsed it. What the letter will do is just support the city's efforts. Here tonight from the East Orange County Water District is Board President Bill Vanderwerf and General Manager Lisa Oland, and they may be able to answer a question or two from you.
Okay, well, do we have any comment, any discussion here before
You
I
know,
bring them
I
up?
do have a question.
To the council or to the individuals?
Yeah, you know, it's probably for staff, so it's
Okay.
probably appropriate. You know, I read through this, and when I was all done, I came out recognizing, number one, it looked like we'd already supported it, but somewhere I came across something that talked about this still being under evaluation, and there was a suggestion somewhere on something I saw that questioned the wisdom in proceeding without an evaluation, maybe a LAFCO evaluation or something that's coming. So let me just ask, is there some report or something that's yet to be released evaluating this that we still have to read?
If I may defer to the East Orange County.
Okay. That was my concern, frankly.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Yes, this is at LAFCO. LAFCO is currently conducting what they're calling an MSR Light on our application. We submitted this application last year in March. Subsequently, LAFCO decided that they wanted to ask other parties if they were interested in taking over these sewers. IRWD in November indicated that they would be Irvine Ranch Water District. They have not yet submitted a plan of operations. When they submit that, LAFCO staff is going to do they've called it a competitive analysis. We're not quite sure what that is, but what I think LAFCO's concerns are that the agency that takes over these sewers is competent, and that they're providing the best service at the best price that can be done. And so through this process, they'd like to determine that. The analysis is going to be interesting because this fee that is being levied right now by Orange County Sanitation District includes about 2/3 of it being set aside for reserves right now. There were no reserves, and now they've been building those up at quite a high rate. Any reductions in the cost to the residents, which are potentially feasible, would most likely come from reducing how much money is being put in that reserve. The cost to actually run the sewers, as you probably know through your own experience, really rests in the cleaning of the sewers and then responding to hot spots. And although we've never operated sewers as a district, my 34 years of experience, about 2/3 of that was spent on the sewer side. So we look at that as primarily being a maintenance function and keeping up the good work that the Sand District has done historically. And we think we're very competitive. One of the things we have in common with Villa Park has been historically a concern about pension costs and salaries. We are very, very competitively priced on our salaries, and we are 2% at 60 on our PERS. We are 84% funded there. We have no unfunded liability there. We have no OPEB benefits that we offer. So we have no unfunded liability there, and currently we have no debt as a district. We see debt as a tool for intergenerational improvements, things that span generations, but we are a pay-go district as far as maintaining our systems. So we share a like philosophy. We're small, we're local representation, and we're about service to our customers. So we felt it was a good fit to come to the council and ask for your support. And that was a long-winded answer to I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, is Irvine is that the only thing LAFCO's looking at is an evaluation? Is Irvine as an alternative and that's it?
Correct.
That's all that's out there?
That's all that's out there. We have obtained letters of support from the cities of Tustin and soon Orange, and the report that you're discussing will be out sometime. Staff is estimated by the end of March, April time period as a draft, and the final sometime May, June.
Now this is with regard to Irvine?
With regard to everything, looking at everything. But since Irvine hasn't submitted their proposal yet, staff isn't sure about when the report's going to come out.
Okay, so the report's not just going to cover Irvine, it's going to cover a plethora, and it's been held up because Irvine says we're going to submit.
Right, they're going to look at us and they're going to look at Irvine at the same time in that report.
Okay, I guess I'm confused. So I got the impression that it was just evaluating Orange and Irvine. Now I get the impression that it's a more comprehensive report that goes beyond the scope of just Irvine and Orange. No?
No,
Okay.
just us and Irvine.
Okay.
Is there any other potential suitors besides Irvine and yourselves?
Tustin, the city of Tustin wanted to look at taking the sewers that were within the city limits, but because the sewers span both the unincorporated and the incorporated area, the Sand District preferred to keep them all together, and it makes sense from a cost standpoint, the economies being what they are. So Tustin really wasn't interested in the unincorporated area, so that wasn't really feasible. The part that's in Orange is a very small part, and they weren't interested in anything but the area that was in Orange.
So you mentioned that you're basically unencumbered all the way. Now, I think the LAFCO folks are going to look a lot at the financial stability and backing of you versus Irvine Water District, which is huge. And, but I think that your overhead rates will be a lot lower.
Yes, sir.
And this goes back to the ratepayers, which is, of course, what we're always interested in here in Villa Park. What are the ratepayers getting for their value? And so,
And that's the point that we like to make, is this isn't a decision about today. This is a decision that goes, you know, in infinite years into the future. And then we also say we've kept faith with our ratepayers. We think our customers are very concerned about those overhead costs now and in the future. And we have kept those low. We have a trailer for an office, and you can look at our reserves. We have about $6 million in reserves, and say, you know, they don't stack up well against the $400 million that IRWD has. But as far as the size of our district, we think they're appropriate. We'd like them to be a little higher, but you know, we're working toward.
I commend you for having a trailer for our headquarters. That's
We're
perfectly fine.
We're very proud of the double wide.
Yeah. You know, I'm very familiar with East Orange County Water District, and they're very frugal. I mean, from their headquarters to everything. So they would be operated that would operate at the least expense. You know, compare that versus Irvine's big boardroom and their trailer that they have over there. But that's the way they run the operation. They're very tight with the money.
We are, and we take nothing away from IRWD. They're an excellent agency, but we think for this particular area, it's 95% within our service area, and that we understand our customer base out here. We are not Irvine.
So basically, you're just very congruent. I mean, it's just the same area.
Same
Yes,
area. They're the same customers.
Exactly.
Maintaining local control.
What are you going to inherit in the way of reserves if you pick this up?
There are about $25 million in reserves that have been accrued now, and that's really the question: is what's the adequacy level of the reserves? And you know, we pledged to freeze the rates for 5 years after we got them, and then we were going to study that. IRWD has said that they will lower the rate immediately right off the bat. We just feel we want to get those sewers and look at them and make sure they're in the condition that they're being presented as, but it probably is very feasible to reduce that rate down and not collect the reserves at the same rate.
Why did it take Irvine so long to respond from March to November?
I don't know. I'm not privy to that information.
I mean, there was a time frame that this had to sit, or why didn't it move forward? I mean, we took action earlier, but.
We entered into the agreement with Orange County Sanitation on February 27th of last year.
Last year, yeah.
So we're clearly, you know, almost a year from that, and we don't have a understanding of why that is, but it is where we are.
Any other questions or comments from staff? Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'll move the staff recommendation in.
Okay, nice second.
No one wants to consider holding this off for a report for a month or two to see what
Hold it off.
LAFCO says about the
For what?
agencies?
For what?
See what LAFCO says about the evaluation of the
Well,
two agencies?
this is just a letter, as my understanding, a letter in support of that
Support.
LAFCO
Support of
application, is it not?
Yeah.
It's a letter of support of
Yeah.
keeping local jurisdiction.
Right.
You know,
But, yeah,
and
who ultimately, is this a LAFCO decision? Is this a LAFCO decision? Oh, it's their decision anyway.
That's comforting.
Okay.
But,
Yeah.
Serrano
All right.
Water has supported it. They've asked us to support it also, to try and, you know, we don't want to get swallowed up.
I'm familiar with that trailer too.
Well, we have a first and we have a
I
second,
used to
Jared.
live over there.
We'll take a voice vote on this one. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries.
All right. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
All right, are we good? Do we need to take a break, or shall we move on?
Sure, let's take a break. That's
Okay.
my
Okay.
If we take a,
sitting here for 3 hours.
take a 5-minute break? Yes, thank you.
Jeez.
Might be 10, but we're limited back there. So, excuse us. Okay, we're gonna resume our city council meetings, 9:05, and we're gonna start with our consent calendar. All items on the consent calendar considered routine are enacted by one motion. Unless otherwise specified to request pulling one, we can vote on them in its entirety. Is there any item which any council member wishes
I'd
to
like to
be
pull number
pulled?
16, please.
Okay, 16. Councilman Colacott?
No.
I may have one.
Okay.
I think I want to pull. I forget which one it is here in the minutes.
Well, I'd like to pull 10, 11, and 14.
You may have just covered mine. Yep, I was going to pull 11.
11, okay. All right. So 10, 11, 14, and 16 are pulled.
I move the rest.
Second.
Could we just ask for public comment? I realize there's only one person.
For the
but-
consent
For
calendar?
the consent
Oh,
calendar.
Yes, of course. Public comment is open. Seeing that there's none. Like that, it's good. If we could turn the camera around so we can see that.
There's the public.
Address the public, please. Thank you. Okay.
To carry the balance, Mayor Pro Tem Mills.
Yes.
Councilman Nelson.
Yes.
Councilman Colacott.
Yes.
Councilman Barnett.
Yes.
Mayor Fasenelli.
Yes. Excuse me. Sorry about that.
Rick mode.
I was reading my notes here. All right, I'm going to take them in order. I pulled item number 10, and I only pulled this because this is something that is new on our consent calendar, something that Councilman Nelson asked. There's several pages here, and maybe, Michelle, you can guide the council for these 5 or 6 pages as to what's included in our consent calendar, so we know what we're looking at and the public knows what we're looking at.
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. What we have done here is basically just expanded our financial report that we have done in the past. Previously, the general fund is what runs the city. That's what we need to be concerned with. We need to make sure that that is running fiscally stable. And so I've always reported to you based on departments. And then Councilmember Nelson and I met, and we decided to do it by account line. Now, each department might have accounts that are in multiple departments, so we combined those. After I generated that query report, I went through and basically gave you an analysis. Another area that we discussed is our software does not budget by month. So we take the entire budget for the year, and we say roughly, okay, at December it should be 50%, at January it should be 58%, in theory, right? If you had everything on a, 1/12 budget. Obviously, that's not the case. So what we do, the thinking that we take behind that is, okay, 58% is what we should be at January 31st. If we are 10% or 5%, those are the two numbers that we use. 10% underestimated on our revenues. So if we're at 48%, that line item we dig into and say, okay, what's the explanation for why are we below 10%? And basically what you have in the narrative form, instead of, previously I would do it as little footnotes and very small legibility for you all, now is in a narrative format. So if you would look at, on the first page it says, franchise fees, number 1. If you went back to the report that you had, the general fund report, and you would look out, the first highlighted footnote you have is franchise fees. And it explains why we are at 29% of our budget, which is obviously below. And it's because it's a timing issue. We get them based on quarters, and our SoCal Edison, SoCal Gas is received in April. There's an explanation for it, and it's written in there to educate council how our revenues and expenditures go. So revenues, we explain 10% under budget, and expenditures, we talk about 5% over budget, because we obviously don't want to be over expenditures. So that's a little more, scrutinized. Councilmember Nelson and I talked, laughed a lot about, wow, there's some $500 line items. Do we really need an explanation on that? And so what we believe is probably the best way to give you a full picture materially, we don't need to go down to the $500 amount, is to do variances in revenues, 10% and 5,000. So if there's a $5,000 variance plus it's 10% of the budget, under a budget, we'll explain it. Does that make sense? So this the one before you does not have that, but that's something that Councilmember Nelson and I discussed and figured that would shorten up the narrative. And truly, if it's $100 difference and it's it's 20% below, you're going to be why, but it doesn't really matter because it's $100.
When you prepared this, shouldn't this go to the Budget and Finance Committee before it shows up into the, this is a Budget and Finance item, just out of.
Well, actually, it's a monthly report that I've always done. I've always given you like a snapshot at the end of the month. Hey, this is what's, this is where we're at. Last council meeting under the direction of council was that I could meet with Councilmember Nelson. He had some ideas based on his experience, how we could format it. And that's why it came this way. This way. It's not it's not something that is an action item. It's more informative, and it's just in a different format that you're normally seeing. So I can take it to Budget and Finance Committee. I just don't know if that's you would want that on a monthly meeting because.
Actually, I think this is wonderful what you've done, but I'd like to see it on a quarterly basis. To me, seeing this on a monthly basis in the size of our city is not necessary, but if it doesn't cause you a lot of work, this to me looks like a lot of work, but if it doesn't cause you a lot of work, then you can put it in monthly. It just looks like a Budget and Finance item, and to be included in the agenda packet, but.
I have to agree. I don't need this monthly either. If it's just to push the button and spit it out, that's fine. If it's not, I don't need it monthly either.
Yeah, quarterly to me is sufficient. This just looks like, this was a great, very detailed report. Thank you. I appreciate it. If it was up to me, 10% is still too low for you to have line. It just is. But if anyone else wants to chime in, Rick, you've chimed in.
She talked about 10% of $5,000, whichever is greater. So it would be nothing less than $5,000.
Yeah, that's much better than our.
So I agree with you. You don't want 10% of $500.
Yes. Okay.
Right.
All right.
So it's 10% of $5,000. So the minimum would be $5,000.
Okay.
And that's what I suggested, because you don't want to explain a variation where the total budget is $500.
Right.
In fact, I think that some of these line items could be consolidated in some overall thing to reduce the amount of line items. But this is just what's in our chart of accounts, as I understand.
This is the account
But you
that
can reduce this by consolidating some of these really small accounts into just one overall account.
I think it's great. I just make a cautionary remark if it takes that much. Look at the time, because we are very limited staff, that I think quarterly would be great for the council. That's my comments on it. So
The quarterly is okay, but my thinking is one of the major things that the council has to do is manage the budget of the city. How can you manage something if you don't know what's happening with it?
Well, that's why I asked that it should be going to the Budget and Finance Committee.
But then if it goes to the Budget and Finance Committee, then would it come to the council?
It should come to the council quarterly.
I'm
Yeah.
fine with
I
that
would
if it
look.
goes to the
I would
Budget and
have
Finance
it come to the council quarterly, and we could deal with it on whoever's in Budget and Finance.
Yeah, Budget and Finance
monthly.
wants to look at it
But
monthly.
as a council member, I'd like to see them. I'd like to see how we're doing versus budget on a monthly basis. That's one of the most important things we do. We set the budget and you manage the budget. How can you manage your budget if you don't know what's happening with the budget?
Well, we have a finance.
Pretty
direct- we have a
But I'm talking
finance
about
director.
how do I know? I have an individual responsibility as council member to manage the budget as well.
Right, but we have committees, just like we've have you on a.
But just
committee.
like we had the CDC committee, you took some of our recommendations, you rejected some of them, which is what you can do. If it's going to go to the Budget and Finance Committee and then come to the council, that's fine.
Oh,
But not just to leave it to the Budget and Finance Committee to make.
No, it's going to come to the council on a quarterly. It would come to the council on a quarterly basis.
I would prefer a monthly basis.
Is it a big cost? Is it a significant time item, or is this a button push?
No, it's not a button push. That is the deal with having the software that we have. It is you do have to do a little bit of recreation. The first rendering that we met a bunch of times. We went over it. It took quite a bit of time.
How many hours did you spend on this?
Your estimate on subsequent ones?
Subsequently, I would say I could put it into my schedule monthly. The only issue that I have is that I get there's some reports that when I do my monthly journal entries, I don't do them until like a couple days before we have to print for council because of the timing of reports. So in that case, I would have the majority of it done, and then the last push of whatever transactions occurred would throw just add a little bit more, so that it wouldn't take that much more. It may not be completely accurate unless we did like a month in arrears. Like if we gave you the January, I could guarantee the January would be done by March for sure. You know what I mean? If I had it early, I could give it to you confidently, knowing that all information was in there. But there's times where I get reports that are
I mean, this is kind of a replacement for the usual one, right?
Yeah.
So is it about the same amount of time?
No.
Okay.
What are we talking about time-wise to do one of these things? That's what I'm trying to get at.
I would say I put a good extra 5 in it.
5 hours.
Mm-hmm.
I like the report. I just think
I do
it
too.
would, I think it would be best for council to look at it on a quarterly basis. I mean, we're sitting here, we look at this. We're a city. I haven't seen any city do this. Okay, they don't have it this detailed. So for us to even do it on a quarterly basis is different than most cities, and it's good. I like it. It's fine. I just don't think that we need to take our time on we don't have enough activity.
I like the report as well, but I have to agree with her. I've been on budget and finance for a while. I've watched these. It's just not that big a volume. It's a stable city. It's not big dollars, and I frankly don't think it's worth the money to do it monthly. I just as soon see it quarterly.
Do you think it'll get easier as you go along with it?
Yes, I do. I know for my, getting it pushed through originally it took a lot of time,
Sure.
and it was during year end. So
Lovely.
yeah, I had quite a bit on my plate. But I don't think it's going to take a ton of time. Now that it is generated, there's just a ton of formatting. There's a ton of checking and going back. The reports that our software presents, you have to do a lot of tweaking. And I mean, I can give you those reports, but you're not gonna be able to read them. I mean, it's not. This is like so much easier to read than what is generated.
That's what I like about it. So why don't we just do it for a while and see how it goes? I mean,
I'd like to make a motion that we present this to the council on a quarterly basis.
And then
I'd second that. I don't really want to read it monthly. I've looked at these for a long time. They just don't change that much.
I mean, 5 hours you didn't have 5 hours before it started, so with the limited staff that we have.
Well, I had a question, Michelle. Is this generated by your program, or is this into a spreadsheet? You take this, put it into a spreadsheet.
Yeah, I put it into a spreadsheet. It's not I can generate a query that gives me the parameters, and then I have to put it in
your
into
system
Excel.
won't generate a report that shows what the year-to-date actuals are in the budget?
I didn't say that. I said it does generate it. It just has to be exported into Excel, and then it has to be formatted, and then it has to. I mean, then you're doing your own. It doesn't highlight the the variances. It doesn't print off the reports for their variances. I mean, that's more just the back end work of it. Whereas the report previously was straight from the software.
You get the data, you don't get the format.
Right.
But I thought that you could just export data from the program to a spreadsheet. I know plenty of places do just.
That's what I'm
export.
saying.
So you can take the program, you can export it to the spreadsheet, then you have the report.
Just need to pretty up that spreadsheet.
Yes, it
No,
takes the work.
I still don't understand. If you have a spreadsheet that has in here these places here, you have the data exported to there, then why do you have to print it up? You already have it set up. You have a template.
To help better present information,
No, I don't presume.
I think he's asking if you could just
template,
transfer it to the fields. In other words, can you just tie the two fields together
Right, exactly.
and send it across?
and send it across, exactly.
no.
That's
And she's saying
exactly-
no.
She said no.
I can export the majority of this report, yes, I can export the majority of the report, but in order to get it into this format and to get, the category segregate, it doesn't, it's an old software system, and it has minimal capabilities. I can get the columns there, I can get the dollar amounts there, but the groupings and whatnot, I cannot.
Well, this type of discussion about how the software works, how it doesn't work, doesn't need to occur. We like what you've done, and I think you've done a great job, and I think that Councilman Nelson had a great idea, and this has been great. But we have a motion on the table. If we could call the vote on that, and if not, there could be a subsequent
Well,
motion.
before we finish discussion, Bill, what about, would every other month help you meet your objectives more effectively than a quarterly?
Okay, well.
Bill?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
yes.
Well,
Yes,
I would like to
I'd
amend.
settle for that system.
I would like to
Even a
amend
quarterly one.
I'd like to amend the motion to make it bi-monthly. Let's give Bill a chance to work with this system with Michelle, and maybe they can work out some efficiencies.
Well, I would like the Budget and Finance Committee, quite frankly, to work with Michelle on it. We have committees for a reason, and that's, at this point, this is Rick and I.
That would be fine.
Yeah, I bet, and we'd like to work with it on a quarterly basis.
All right.
Not on a bi-monthly basis. Rick and I pretty much agreed with that, and that's,
Want to defer, is it a proposal to defer it to Budget and Finance for?
no, it does, but I'd like to, it works with Budget and Finance, and we present it to the council on a quarterly basis. I haven't changed the motion here.
When will the quarter start?
Oh, we can, let's see. What's the end of our year, June, May?
June.
Okay, so.
So, the next one comes out in the end of March or April?
There you go.
Get March,
Well.
yeah.
There you go. There you go. So you're gonna have another one next month, and then you'll have it in June. So you'll have 2 months in a row. It's worked well. I mean, we've entrusted Michelle to be our finance director. I think that this council, as well as prior councils, have balanced this budget, have added reserves. So what we've had works well, and we tweak it. And it's been tweaked, but this is a tremendous amount of detail that I don't necessarily know that we need to be provided with monthly. If I saw other cities that did this, great, but I don't see this kind of detail anywhere else. You see it in a subcommittee, but not when it comes to a full council. You're part-time, you didn't even have 5 hours before that. I'm not quite sure how you found 5 hours to do this right now, and that does concern me.
Well, I tell you, from a business aspect, this is what I'm used to seeing, from a business point of view. So, I like it.
I do too.
I like it too. I just don't need to see it monthly.
Well, Bob made a motion for bi-monthly.
No, that's my amendment.
That's a substitute motion?
Yeah.
Who seconded it?
You second it?
I did not.
I will. I'll second it.
We'll vote on the subsequent first, and that is to produce this report every other month. Councilman Colacott?
Yes.
Councilman Nelson?
Yes.
Councilman Barnett?
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Mills?
Yes.
Mayor Fasenelli?
No.
The motion carries 3-2.
And we can revisit this later again. Okay.
Remember that.
Item number 11. And I just have a correction here on this. This is on the 3rd page. I'm gonna start from the bottom. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4th paragraph from the bottom. Let's see, she enjoyed being on the city council with him the last 2, would you change the 8 to 2 years? And that was it.
Move it? Did you move it?
No, move.
I moved. Oh, a second then.
Wait, what are we doing?
It was a correction.
It's a correction.
Oh, on number 11?
Where's
I
the
pulled-
correction?
I want to pull this one too.
2 years instead of
Yeah,
8.
I
Barnett has,
There's one other correction too.
Oh.
Councilman Barnett also pulled it, so excuse me.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Bill.
No, you go ahead with yours.
Oh, I thought we were done. Sorry.
Okay.
On page 3, in the second to the last paragraph, where it refers to about honesty there in the first sentence, I recall the rest of that. This was a very, we had our number of differences, and I wanted to say some nice things I thought were appropriate, and those are contained in the second sentence. But I don't really recall getting into that, the honesty issue. And so if it's on there, you know, I suppose that's fine, but I don't recall that. I would just as soon have that redacted to exclude the first sentence there and carry with the second, because I do remember that being the thrust
I
of
thought
my
that word was a bit odd.
discussion. Yeah, there might have been another word that maybe shows up in the thesaurus, but I think I didn't use it. In the way
Councilman Nelson?
politics are these days, I don't want to.
I don't think I can find mine now. I saw one earlier, but I can't find it now.
You think you could find it in there?
No, I can't
No?
find it.
Okay. All right, so
seen
we'll
one
go ahead and
We'll go
and
ahead
move
and
them
prove
then with those two corrections.
Second.
A voice vote, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
All right. All right, number 14, this is the, it's a speaker card. When it comes to item B, under summary, it said to address the city council at any, you put, it has one meeting, but it's one agenda item, not, we're not limiting 5 minutes per person at a meeting, it's per agenda item. Okay, and I believe it's also in another,
I believe that's in our ordinance.
it's also in another spot also. Because when we talked about.
This is the public comment period only, not each agenda item.
This is.
This B, limitations, the public comment period shall be limited.
Yeah, it's brought up in another spot. We need to just look at that and make sure that what we have is right. I'm gonna look it up. Thank you.
I think we're okay.
Do you think you're good? Because it's just that public comment part?
Yeah,
Okay,
it's
all
just
right.
public
Just want to
comment.
make sure that we
Okay.
don't stifle anybody there. Okay, great. When I look at the ordinance, 2015 to 591, and I'm going to just bring this up. We don't need to correct it at this point, but it says that the mayor pro tem shall sign such documents that they've been adopted, approved during the meeting which they presided. And there was a meeting during the summer when you were out as mayor, and I presided, and I didn't sign any of the documents. I just read that, so for future knowledge, if that comes up, and I so happily take a vacation and I'm not here.
But if you're Mayor Pro Tem serving as mayor, that you have the same effect, right?
Yes, but
Doesn't matter.
I didn't sign the documents.
Okay.
The mayor did, so I saw that in our ordinance, so I just wanted to make sure that I brought that up.
All right.
Let's see.
I doubt I signed it either.
And that's it. Let's see. And I will move. I just wanted some clarification on that
Second.
and a correction.
The motion is to approve the second reading of adopt ordinance number 2015-591, amending Article 2-3 of the Villa Park Municipal Code pertaining to the rules of order for the conduct of proceedings of city council meetings. Councilman Colacott?
Yes.
Councilman Barnett?
Yes.
Councilman Nelson?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Mills?
Yes.
Mayor Fasenelli?
Yes.
The motion carries 5-0.
Okay.
Okay, I
16?
pulled number 16. I just got this contract, and then I see that the bid sheet is back here, of course. with the lowest bidder. I need to ask how we recognize that Ramona, in this case, as the best value here. How can we ascertain that? And how are we going to guarantee that? I suppose it's in conjunction with Civil Source. We'll ensure that they do all of that. But, and it's, also I'm kind of concerned because there's a big differential in the price. It's $60,000 is the next competitor. And that's a pretty good chunk, actually. How do we ensure that they do the work properly and for good value over a long period of time, quality work?
Yes, Ramona was very low price, and it's about 20% lower than the second bidder. And we've checked their references and the various cities where they worked at. They completed their work properly, and that's why we also have an inspector and a construction management, in order to ensure that the company and the contractor is constructing according to the plans and specifications.
Now, this work is, how long will it take?
It's about, we have in the contract 45 days.
45 working days?
Correct.
So 9 weeks?
Correct.
Okay. And then Civil Source will be there every day with them, correct?
There will be inspector there continuously, all the times with them.
Okay. Is there any difference in their workers? I mean, are they coming from afar, or do they come from Texas or something, or?
No, I mean, it's, they pay prevailing wages.
Yeah.
And they're required to provide us with a certified payroll.
Do they have maybe an incentive clause for their workers or something that's, which they should have?
Well,
I mean, obviously, I mean, how are they doing this?
It is a still soft market, and I guess they're competing with each other. And we're lucky that be able to get good prices, and we're going to make sure that the inspector and the project manager is on top of them, that we are getting what's on the plans.
Okay.
Yes.
They're all over the place, Greg. Heck, we got them all the way up to 617.
Yep.
Yeah, but still, there's like a bunch of them around the 400 range. And then,
Correct.
yeah.
Low, mid fours.
But you would think it's kind of what the range of what it's worth, and why are these guys so low?
Yeah. I'm not questioning that as much as I'm wondering why. And if they're all wanting some work right now, I do understand that, of course.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just wondering if how we would check these folks. I mean, in your experience, your inspector's going to be with them every day. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right.
He'll be standing on top of their.
Will there also be photo documentation, everything?
Yes. Normally, what
Before and
we
after?
do, the inspector, is we make sure that we take pictures prior the work, and also as the work progress.
Okay.
There will be some pictures of the trench, pictures of the laying the pipe, and also with their subcontractor when they do the relining. So that's will be done.
Okay.
Matter of fact, the subcontractor who is doing the relining is subcontractor for the majority of the rest of the
Orange County.
bidders.
Yeah, I saw that. I guess they're already set up, so maybe that's the part of it too. I know with asphalt guys, that's a big deal if they don't have to move a lot of stuff too far. So, okay, thanks.
Move it?
I move.
I'm
sorry.
No, but I had a comment. I was going to pull this item too, but for a different reason. The reason is because you asked in here, the recommendation is approve 2 contracts, and there were no contracts attached. So it's kind of difficult to approve contracts when you don't know what they are. I see subsequently we've gotten a copy of those contracts. But my thing is, I just think any time in the future when we ask to approve contracts, they should be attached.
No, absolutely. We'll make that going forward in the future.
Well, that brings another issue about actually the contents of this and the timing when we get them. And I know it's because the way we've always done things here. It's like Bill makes a good point, as we talked about it earlier. We like to see this stuff that's a little more heavy, a little more ahead of time if we could.
No, absolutely. These have always been our form contracts, so we'll make sure to get them out with the agenda next time.
Because
But even if they form contracts, yes, that the recommendation is to approve the contracts. Absolutely. But there are no contracts, you know, so how do I know? How do I know what I'm approving when I approve this?
Because
Sounds like-
normally
sounds
it's
like a
a
hiccup.
standard form,
Sometimes we get them.
and we'll be glad to include them in there. It's the standard form which it's being used for all the contractors and the professional agreements, which is standard, which is reviewed by the city attorneys.
Yeah,
So
but-
just
but-
a matter
but-
we change the name and the scope of work.
But one of the things, I looked at this contract with Silver Source for construction management, like for $39,000. I think we got the information today, but I seen the past one. It had in the contract the information about how many days they were gonna be on site there, which would answer your question. You know, it showed they're gonna be there every day. That's what shows in the contract. So, it answers that question. So there's some differences in here is how they get to this $39,000. And it shows that in the contract, how they get to that. So it's not just this standard contract, but also tells how you got to that number.
I have to agree, it doesn't make sense to attach it. With that, though, I second.
Well, typically, we've gotten
We'd
them.
be glad to do.
It appears to me it was just a hiccup and we didn't get them because typically we do get the contract, so.
When will they start after the approval of this?
Well, then they would have to provide, we'll send them the copy of the contract, and they have to provide us with the necessary insurance and the bonds before they start and before the mayor signs the contract.
And then all the residents will be also notified in the affected
Definitely.
areas?
Yes.
That's
There will
part
be
of the
notices
construction
to all the,
management.
Yeah, but
residents that are
not the
being
day before it
impacted.
starts.
No. It's we give them enough notice, and especially there is one of the pipes. It is inside the private property, and I've already contacted them several times, and we walked into their property.
So you have an easement already in there built in?
There's an easement. There's
Okay.
a pipe, and we're using a different method of repairing that pipe by using a pipe bursting. So in order not to minimize the trenching that's in their property.
Is that the Ville Isle property?
It is on James Circle.
Oh, James, not up there on Villa and Valley?
It's in James Circle.
Okay, because they're having a problem there, and it's it's behind their swimming pool. Oh, it's gonna be horrible.
Okay, so this has been passed. We were done, and so.
Yes.
we
I
have a
move it.
motion.
I'll second.
Motion and a second to approve the recommendation as stated in the staff report. Mayor Pro Tem Mills.
Yes.
Councilman Nelson.
Yes.
Councilman Colacott.
Yes.
Councilman Barnett.
Yes?
Mayor Fasenelli.
Yes.
Carries 5-0.
We're on to new business. Item 18, which is CalPERS preliminary termination value.
Did we skip this one, or was this
On 18, this is,
17? Is that
17 was a consent.
Was it
As
consent?
consent.
That's it, yeah.
Michelle?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. As was directed last September, we were asked to get a letter from PERS to see if we could terminate and see what that dollar amount was. They've been working on our letter, our preliminary termination, which is not the final number, which we all we know that. This staff report kind of summarizes what we discussed at our Budget and Finance Committee, and we brought this to the Budget and Finance Committee. We rehashed it, and basically, if you look at the attached letter dated January 2nd, 2015, this is a summary of the, thank you. This is a summary of the letter that we received from PERS saying our termination. And if you look at the first column, it says termination values as frozen compensation. And then the next column is non-frozen compensation. And to give you an idea, just real quickly, non-frozen means once we terminate, as an employee's salary increases, Villa Park is still going to pay a share of that increasing salary, which doesn't seem reasonable. So if Villa Park was actually going to terminate, the reasonable one that we assume that council would pursue would be the frozen compensation. That would mean as of the date that Villa Park gets out of PERS, then that locks in the salary that the percentage that Villa Park would be responsible for paying, and that's how the actuary will determine how much is owed. So you can kind of ignore the last column because we would not recommend that. So so now let's go to the column that says frozen compensation. And what this number shows, and we ended up in December, we paid off our side fund. If you recall, it was $253,000 that council agreed to pay off. We paid that off. This number does not include that. So what you would want to do is you want to go down to the line 4, which says unfunded liability surplus. That $3,917,000 is the dollar amount that they're saying potentially would be our payoff. That needs to be reduced by $253,000 because we have already paid that off. So it's 3.6. Woo, I know. Got that pocket change. So basically taking that idea, 3.6 million, good chunk of change, how we could pay for that, we could borrow. The scenario is it's going to be higher because we've got another year, because our actual termination date will be to September 23, 2015. So that would be the actual date. So there would be an increase of that 3.6 plus the idea of we'd have to research another benefit. And you'd be basically paying the 3.6 plus another benefit for the employees. And the recommendation, as you see in the staff report, is that it is not feasible at this time. However, Budget and Finance did recommend that every couple years we take a look at this again, file for, see if we can terminate again. We might be in a better position. We were laughing about, if you look at the first column, the annual valuation is that they're assuming they're going to get a 7.5, but if 7.5 investment return rate, but when they're going to terminate, well, it's only going to be 2, really. So, who knows? We might get 7.5%, and a windflow of money will come at us, and it'll drop our dollar amount down. Mm-hmm. But based on the research that has been put in front of us, it seems like a lofty.
5% for the bullet train.
There you go, because we need that.
Budget and Finance met, Rick and I met with Michelle, and it's quite obvious recommendation is we don't have the money, and we're not going to borrow money. And also, though, that we would like the council to consider that we request this every 2 years. And the purpose of requesting it for 2 years is, thanks to Rick's harping, we now have a number. We've brought awareness to it, and it would be good to track. Tracking it every year is not necessary. It's this is not a number that we can pay off. We're not that type of a city. But to have them be responsible to give us a number every 2 years, I think is a responsible thing for us to request. And we're bringing that back to council.
I'm going to, if it's not some Brown Act violation, I don't think it is, I was going to circulate some articles that I got, 3 2-page articles that I extracted on the Stockton bankruptcy and Judge Klein's decision up there. And in there, he specifically discusses this differential in the interest rate. And the problem with me emailing that to council after the fact, really nothing pending. Is that?
Do you have the documents now so that we can present
I ain't
them?
going to make any comment. I was just going to forward the copies of the newspaper articles. I sent it to Jared.
Right, to Jared. He'll read it.
It was sent to everyone.
I'll just tell you the bottom line.
We'll make it available to the public.
Interesting. He says he made about 3 comments that were very interesting in that case. First of all, he said that the city has the right to terminate and modify the plan, even though the city doesn't want to do that, and they approved it without reducing the CalPERS payments. He said the city has a right to do it. Secondly, he criticized CalPERS and said it was questionable that CalPERS even had standing to appear in the case, because in fact CalPERS doesn't have liability for the employee payments. If apparently the way the contracts read, if the city stops paying, then CalPERS will accordingly reduce the payments to employees, and accordingly he said, I'm not sure CalPERS really has a play in this and perhaps shouldn't even be here in this proceeding. And then secondly, he went on to say that the cities have a right to depart from the CalPERS plan. However, very difficult because CalPERS has what he terms the poison pill.
Mhm.
And he went on to define and highlight this interest differential and said that what happens is if you decide to leave, they create a separate pool. They have a separate fund. It's a termination pool. And they allocate a 2.75% return to the termination pool, and the ongoing gets a 7.5% return.
Assumption, yeah.
And he
okay.
pointed out that that was a poison pill to preclude people from getting out, even though they had the contract right to leave. So that kind of gives you a little feeling for what we're dealing with. Anyway, we can't pay for it, so I think this require any action. It doesn't, does it?
Yeah, it does. I make a motion to not terminate CalPERS based on the report that was provided to us, and request this information for the dollar amount for the termination every 2 years to be presented to council.
Second.
I think just asking for the information every 2 years is a futile kind of thing. It's always going to be around $3.5 million, and we can't afford that. How much do we spend annually on this now that we paid off the site fund? We spend maybe $50,000.
It'll be, I think it'll be about 70.
$70,000. You know, you're never going to spend $3.5 million to get out of $70,000 a year debt. So if we ask every 2 years, it's still going to be a huge amount, a lot more than we can afford to get out of. As you indicated, Rick, they got the deck stacked against you here. The deck is stacked against you getting
There's no
out.
question. And if it costs us any money to speak up to make the app, I would suggest that we evaluate as we want. If it really doesn't cost us anything to do it, I think it's interesting to look at it and see what's going on and kind of keep abreast of it. It's such an abuse.
It's always going to be too much.
You know,
What's the cost to
there's no
ask
cost.
every 2 years?
Well, it costs them something though too.
Bill, if interest rates, interest rates increase substantially, would that not reduce the liability? You'd basically eliminate that differential?
It's not they're gonna keep that differential in the interest
Somehow
rate.
or another, yeah.
Keep
Bill's
them from
right.
getting
I mean,
out.
a large- okay.
I'm sure
They're
they
gonna
will
keep
for the
that.
poison pill.
That's-
To me, it was a way to keep the
Okay.
public informed if
Yes.
we didn't spend any money on it. I mean, that's
Okay.
really where
Yeah,
I'm looking.
it's an.
I'm just saying it's just a futile attempt.
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
I don't argue with
It
it.
is.
I
It's just to
tend to
keep
agree with you,
everybody
Bill.
abreast.
And I just want to, I just like to have it there to show the public what's going on.
Okay.
If we spend a bunch of money, I wouldn't do it.
Because there's no way you're gonna spend that kind of money to get out of $70,000 a year we spent.
all agree.
We got, I think we reduced it probably about $50,000 by paying off the site fund, did we not? Right, we almost cut it in half by paying off the site fund. That was the best thing we could do was pay that off.
Yeah, no, that was worthwhile.
But it's other, you're not gonna get out of it, Rick.
I don't argue. This is gonna have to change.
I understand your frustration,
I know,
but
it's
you're
gonna
not
have to
gonna.
change in Sacramento.
Well,
Yeah.
Jared, call for the vote.
Yeah, the motion is to not terminate, and then every 2 years we send the resolution of intention to terminate the company.
Correct.
Councilman Colacott.
Yes.
Councilman Barnett.
Yes.
Councilman Nelson.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Mills.
yes.
Mayor Fasenelli.
Yes. Okay, we've taken 19. 20, okay. Individual council member information items and required meeting attendance reports. Let's start with Councilman Colacott.
Well, let's see, I'd like to report that last weekend I was fortunate enough to attend the State Water Project tour up in the Delta area, and got a lot of good information about the precarious nature of our imported water supply. The tour was sponsored by MODOC, and Director Larry McKinney, who's an old friend of mine, was the tour director. So it was not only a very informative tour, but a very enjoyable tour, and I learned a lot. We had our first meeting of the Law Enforcement Advisory Committee on February 17th at the Serrano Water District. All the members showed up. It was a good meeting. We're on the way to prepare an evaluation of the crime statistics for submittal to the city, and at our next meeting we'll be electing the chair and vice chairman from our citizen committee members. And the Community Services Foundation also asked me to provide an update on their activities. At the last meeting we had a very in-depth discussion of the Brown Act and how it applies to the Community Services Foundation. And we also developed the nominations for our board of directors. And also, each councilman has been provided the tentative list of foundation events. There's still some that are pending scheduling, but they've got most of the year planned out, beginning with May 23rd, a dog walk and adopt a dog event.
Thank you. Councilman Nelson?
Oh, for me,
Yes.
yeah. I want to ask the council if they would be interested in getting rid of these books and getting into a more modern way of having agenda items. For example, I would prefer to use my iPad and download the agenda here if the city can handle this issue where the iPad doesn't click through on the links very well, or it doesn't click through at all. If they could satisfy that, I would just start using my iPad to do this. I wonder if the rest of you were interested in having staff to look at what is the cost in labor and material and time in putting these together, and how much would we save if we went to a more modern kind of thing.
You know,
and if some others were willing to use their iPads.
I think there's another advantage to using the iPad or iPad, and that is that some of these agenda items, they're going to be available a couple weeks, maybe 3 weeks before our actual meetings, and even our committee meetings.
Yeah.
And but as it is now, they have to wait, or staff has to wait, so they've got everything to put into the agenda package, so we don't see anything until the Friday before our council meetings. They could start populating our agenda package earlier on, so that we'd have more of a chance through the month to start becoming familiar with some of these agenda items. So I think it's a great idea, and I would support asking staff to look into iPads.
It doesn't have to be iPads, it could be anything, right? It doesn't matter.
It could be anything you can use it on.
Yeah.
As long as
iPad.
the city provides it.
Well, I think that for those that want it, that the city could provide it with other savings they have from this. Because what do they cost, $600-700 a piece, or less?
No, they're about 9.
And you got these books every month. You got all this paper, you got all this labor, and many public agencies have gone to that kind of agenda.
Well, that's a good point. I also like.
It won't solve this problem, but.
Well, you didn't even need that thing.
We can ask for that in digital copies from that.
But if we go that way,
I actually
then I would
looked
like
at
to
it
see a lot more
this
things
time.
put on the board up here. And then I think we need a monitor out here so we can see, because we can't. I know Bill and I can. Well, we got neck problems now.
Yeah, our necks are twisted.
Okay. But I think it's something you should look into. I mean, this is probably costing what, $200 at least in paper.
Oh, no.
Yeah, paper absolutely.
And then a whole day of labor.
It's a whole day of labor.
That's my point. Why should we go,
Kind of like
21st
these because you can flip them and write on them, but to be real honest, if everybody wants to go to electronic,
could-
I'd go as long as I can type into it and make some notes.
iPads, the information, you can type on
Yeah,
and do
yeah,
something.
I won't fight it. I kind of like these, but I wouldn't fight it. I'd go with a group.
So I guess directing staff to look at the cost of going electronic and paperless for the council members, whether it be iPads, tablet, whatever it might be,
Whatever
but
it might
some,
be.
yeah.
Something,
But
whatever it might be.
that would,
Also, I think this is a good thing because at that point, everything on it is the city property anyway.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. And that also reduces our liability using our own computers.
I think looking at some, if you're gonna do that, I think looking at some laptops or Ultrabooks or something might make more sense, just
Than the
because
iPad.
trying to fool around with these papers and squiggle all this stuff around on a little iPad screen is not real. I've got an iPad and I wouldn't want to use it for this. A laptop I might, but not really an iPad. Too small, too much goofing around with
we
it.
direct staff to go find, come back with some options
Come
for
back
us.
with some
How's
options,
that?
exactly.
The software is important too.
The software is the key issue.
Yes.
Because right now.
Because they have software that you can just like you're flipping through, but it's heavy. It's heavy.
Given the timing,
Big file.
Councilman Nelson, can we give them 60 days, to
It's
look
nothing-
at,
it's
yeah,
nothing
not to
urgent,
come back?
nothing
'cause they-
urgent.
Okay.
It's just that I thought we ought to come in the 21st century.
Sure, since we're talking about budgets, we have another study session coming up, that would be good, so
okay,
we can
all right,
talk
that-
about
no,
it.
that's
and then-
fine.
A little Surface might not be
That's, I
bad
think,
too.
Surface is
Surface
the
might
key
not
word.
be bad. That's a good balance, small and light too.
Hey, we're not paying off the pension, so, you know.
Just say you 3.6 million, huh?
Do you have anything else,
All right.
Councilman
No,
Nelson?
no, that's
Okay.
it.
All right, Rick?
Well, it seems to me I had a fire authority meeting, but I don't recall that having been eventful enough to report on it, so I'll pass as having no significant item to report.
Councilman Mills?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Mills.
Pardon, 10 minutes, please?
Mayor Pro Tem.
Oh,
You can
it
have 10
doesn't
minutes.
matter.
You-
Doesn't
You
matter.
are welcome to have 10
I'm
minutes.
still a council member, regardless.
Okay, yeah, you bump it to 10
There we
minutes,
go.
light's gonna go on.
As far as, I've
Started
been
on
to
orange.
several meetings at the sanitation district. Tomorrow night, we have our regular board meeting. Had 2 administrative meetings. We have a lot of events going around contracts with the 5 different unions represented at the sanitation district. I'd like to also, so everyone to know that 100% of everything that goes into the Fountain Valley facilities is treated and put back into the ground, which acts as a water barrier for the saltwater incursion, and also other places back up in this arena as well for sinkholes. They're going to get to a point for the Huntington Beach facility eventually in about 2 or 3 more years where they'll be able to do about 80%, then 90 and on up, but it'll never be at the same rate as the Fountain Valley facility. They also went into a lot of the director of personnel, was in there for 30-some years, retired, and he's been replaced by the assistant general manager. I do enjoy my time there because of the professionalism and the depth of the organization. They are awarded a lot of nationwide awards. They are emblematic of what a district should be. So that's why I was asking so many questions to the East Orange, and they'll get a lot of direction from them because the sanitation district down in Fountain Valley had already approved that whole arrangement as it is. That being said, there's a lot of the members of the sanitation district that have been there 20, 25 years have been on this board because of the way it formed over the years. And so it's very interesting, as Bob knows, there's a lot of history how this was all formed basically 16 years ago and how it all came together to be a one cohesive unit. That's what they're doing now to serve basically all this northern part of Orange County. As far as vector control, I didn't go last week because I was out of the country. And I do know, talking to them, that not much happened. They are just printing out new cards and stationery because of the new logos. So that's about it.
All right. January 29th, I attended with Councilman Barnett and Collicutt and Nelson the Brave and Bravest that OCFA put up, and it was a very nice ceremony honoring our Brave and Bravest, and that was a nice thing. On February 5th, Mayor Pro Tem Mills and I attended the Water Policy and Forum dinner where they had Lucy Dunn tell us about earthquake preparedness and, quite frankly, in her own words, say if the big one hits, we're in trouble. And we learned not necessarily anything new except for the fact that the city of LA is going to put new taxes on their landowners and on their building owners because they want to have their buildings all retrofitted. And she would love for Orange County to do that also, and it's extremely, extremely expensive. Yeah, it's water systems, it's building, it's everything, so we had a little bit.
Mrs. Dunn does not work for any private enterprise, by the way.
Yes.
So.
Not at all. We had a budget and finance meeting. I went to Serrano Water Board's normal board meeting. Everything was great there. And the council here also had another meeting in the middle of the month. We had a special study session, which we talked about planning and budgeting, and we have another one planned, I believe, in April. So we've done double duty this month and trying to plan for the city. We had a compost seminar here on the 11th, which was very well attended. We had about 32 people in here of all ages, and Republic Services did a wonderful job for about 2 hours teaching our residents what to do with their food waste and some worm composting, and it was very well received. And that tied into this Saturday. We had Republic Services out at Villa Park High School with a semi-truck delivering the compost, which the line was already lined up at 7 o'clock. So it was very well received, and if you came, that was great. There was a blood drive held in here by one of our businesses, Hillary Thompson. Once again, not sponsored, but if you will, did open up City Hall and had a blood drive, and that was very well attended, much better than it was last year when it was out in the parking lot. So there was a lot more room here, and I thank her very much for doing that community service for Villa Park. And on March 11th, which will be prior to the next council meeting, I will be principal of the day for Serrano Elementary, and I'm very proud to have that honor. And other than that, we are adjourning to a scheduled meeting of the council on March 17th. It has been rescheduled due to the second child of Jared possibly being born, and being the small city we are, we don't have anyone to actually replace him here, and it would be prudent to have him here. So we are adjourned till March 17th. Thank you.
10 o'clock, look at that.
I had a record time, huh?
We did good.
It could have been longer. We can do it.
Am I filling out for particular
Oh.
items?
No. No, you
When?
don't need
Tomorrow?
this. You don't need this.
Yeah, he gave you an
No, you're
application.
good. You have to- did you-
No, I already filled it out. I already gave him one.
Oh, you gave him one already?
Not that I'm going to use it.
Everything
all
will
right.
work exceptionally
Good.
well. I have a question for you, though.
That's the way to
Maybe
do it then.
Jared,
Let somebody drive her.
we went, and no one knew about this.
All right.
The,
His microphone's off?
The Knox box